Good evening, everybody. This formal meeting of the Board of Education for July 22nd, 2014 is called to order. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone present and to our television viewers. Any item that will be voted on this evening has been posted as required by state law. This meeting is being televised live and will be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks. Please check the board website for replay times. This meeting is also being streamed live on our PPS TV Services website. Student Representative Jez Wall is absent this evening. So at this time, the first item on our agenda is public comment. Ms. Houston, do we have anyone signed up? Good evening, Mr. Porter. Okay, thank you.
What I have to say, you have a copy there, but I'm not going to get it all in 3 minutes, so I have an abridged version. Can I go?
Go for it.
My name is Dave Porter, P-O-R-T-E-R, Chair Knowles, Superintendent Smith, members of the board, members of the public. My comment relates to the equity update, which is on tonight's agenda. First, I am disappointed that the equity update, coming out now in mid-July, only reports on progress through January 2014, and thus does not include data on the current hiring of approximately 400 new teachers. When will the public get that report? Second, there is a critical shortage of Hispanic teachers and Spanish dual language immersion teachers, and the shortage is not just in Portland but across Oregon. Without significantly more Spanish dual language immersion teachers, PPS will be unable to close the achievement and graduation gaps for Hispanics, and many English native students will remain monolingual without desired and needed Spanish bilingual skills. PPS should not let this happen. Note that the PPS Affirmative Action Plan for 2014-16 lists as underutilization or shortage of 153 Hispanic Latino elementary classroom teachers. Last week, the dual language immersion staff told me that several elementary level Spanish bilingual immersion teacher positions remain unfilled. PPS staff has already made recruiting trips to places like Texas and Mexico. The shortage is real. According to my suggested dual language immersion expansion plans, PPS will need at least 82 additional Spanish dual language immersion elementary teachers over the next 10 years. There is a need for a large number of Spanish dual language immersion teachers in Oregon outside of PPS. Oregon currently has 11 school districts, each with more than 1,000 Hispanic students and no dual language immersion program. And within those 11 school districts, there are 15 schools each with a majority of Hispanic students and no dual language immersion programs. Third, I do not think the PPS Affirmative Action Plan for 2014-16 is adequate. It will not lead to the selection and hiring of an additional 82 elementary school Spanish immersion teachers over the next 10 years, nor to the selection and hiring of 153 Hispanic Latino elementary teachers in the near future. Long-term, much more needs to be done to reshape the hiring prospects for Spanish dual language immersion teachers. The existing Oregon teacher credentialing and teacher education, higher education systems are outdated. They are failing us. In the interim, PPS needs to work with the credentialing and teacher education systems as they are. PPS needs new interim strategies to find the Spanish dual language immersion teachers it needs. The strategies in the current plan are not enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, next on our agenda is a presentation on our equity update. We get the progress report from our equity implementation plan. Superintendent Smith, would you like to introduce this item?
I would, and I will ask Lorenzo Poe, who's our Chief Equity Officer and Director of Partnerships for the district, to present this. And tonight's plan is actually, report on the plan is going to be fairly dense. So it will include an update on our affirmative action plan, as well as an update on our equity plan and its implementation, on our key performance indicators, and on our research partnership with Portland State University. So Lorenzo Poe.
Thank you. Co-Chair Knowles and Bilals, board member Superintendent Smith, thank you very much. The board passed in June 11 the racial education equity policy. And in July 2013, the board passed affirmative action policy. This evening, we want to talk with you about both. And while I'm at it, I'd like to bring up the panelists with me. I would like to introduce Donnie Adair, who's our affirmative action consultant, Jolly Patterson, our counsel, and Sean Murray from HR. Sean here yet?
He's on his way down.
He's on his way down. Just want to make sure that we recognize that we will talk about both pieces of the equity piece tonight. We will talk about the equity plan. We will also walk through the affirmative action policy. But first, let me start by offering an apology to you. This is allergy season, and allergies are wreaking havoc with my voice. So if I start coughing and sip water, it is just because that allergy is bothering me, not anything else. And as you know, the affirmative action policy was passed in 2013, and in it, it directed the superintendent to create and implement an affirmative action equal opportunity plan. This plan would create and identify goals and strategies for creating the kind of diverse workforce that the public commenter testified to. Again, we're aware of the kind of issues, the kind of strategies, the kind of deficiencies we have in creating the kind of workforce that we all envision us having, and is what the plan and the work of the district calls out to do and make those efforts. The plan also calls for identifying those strategies that create a diverse workforce, that also brings us in line by creating strategies to meet the State of Oregon's Minority Teachers Act, which directs districts to have a workforce which mirrors the student population of their particular district. The minority teacher, yes.
The state plan, because in the thing it said the state plan mirrored the workforce of the children in the state. And each district did the state, and that was a question I forgot to ask you when we talked.
Yeah. The Minority Teachers Act asked the districts mirror the student populations of their districts.
Of the district?
Yes.
Because in the material that you sent us, it said this,
No.
that it mirrors the population of the state.
No, it's the districts.
I don't know, okay. I just wanted to get that straight, thank you.
So,
Sorry to interrupt
yeah.
you.
So in order to comply with the racial equity policy in the Oregon Teachers Minority Act, we will be making those meaningful efforts to recruit, to employ, to support, and retain a qualified workforce that reflects the diversity of our population. Again, it is important to note, as we state in the policy, we are attempting to mirror those populations of kids of color in our workforce and their family population that we serve, because we recognize, and we're beginning to see more and more data that talks about the importance of teachers reflecting the students they see and students' ability to identify with those people who look like them as role models, and their ability to understand the needs of them and their families helps us, in fact, move towards a better educational outcome for all of our students. So again, the whole point really is to look at how we, in fact, producing a workforce that mirror the student population we serve as a way to begin to help close our chronic and persistent academic achievement gap. With that, the Office of Equity contracted with a consultant, Mr. Adair, as we looked at creating an affirmative action plan that outlined goals and strategies that both looks at our current workforce, look how we're doing in relationship to the available labor market that we serve in this area, and what would it look like, what are those strategies to meet the state's Minority Teachers Act goal of being a district that mirrors the population that we serve. Incidentally, the revision of the Minority Teachers Act asked that in 2015 that districts make a 10% improvement from 2012 baseline data in terms of its hiring for workforce of color. We can give you some numbers as it relates to the act at this time. But it's also important for us to note as we move through this, and when you pass the policy, like the plan, it is a voluntary plan. It is not required by federal government or state statute, but we, the district, believes that affirmative action is a good and transparent management tool for us to diversify the workforce. This plan will monitor and measure our progress towards those efforts. We're doing it because we believe, as a management tool and good stewards of a district, our transparency and our strategies about how we're trying to diversify our workforce and to reach the aspirational goals of the Minority Teachers Act, that is important that we have a plan that we periodically bring to you, examine, and work for. And that is what you will see in our affirmative action plan. Before I turn it over to Mr. Adair, I do want to say this. In pulling together the plan, we pulled together representatives, liaisons from each of the district's divisions. And we asked them to work with us in looking at their workforce, their needs, their strategies. Whether it was those in the Office of School Performance, where we looked at teachers and others, whether it was in our facilities, whether it was in the superintendent's office, best knowing how, in fact, to recruit for, strategize about getting a workforce that mirrors those in that field. And so I know a number of those liaison people are here with us tonight. I do want to thank them for their work, their energy, and excitement. It was probably one of the most exciting and challenging and rewarding experience I've watched us collectively go through as a district. And in doing it, it really brought a level of camaraderie across departments. So I want to thank those liaisons. Their names are in the package that we gave to you. So with that, let me turn this over to Donnie Adair, our affirmative action consultant, and he can tell you bits of his resume. But I will say this, he's had a number of years in both city, state, and county government and nationally in development and expertise in affirmative action. So with that, let me turn it over to Mr. Donnie Adair.
Good evening. I'm Donnie Adair from North Portland, a lifelong resident of North Portland. And it has been really a pleasure and an honor to coordinate this project for the Portland School District. I just want to talk a little bit about the process. It was my job to come in, not only bring some expertise in a format that we could utilize to develop a specific individualized plan that would meet the needs of the board and carry out the board policy so that the superintendent can put into action what you ask her to do as far as an affirmative action plan, adding this as one piece of the equity landscape for the Portland School District. What we did, and I do want to note again, the liaisons were appointed by all the executives. I met with each executive that reports to Superintendent Smith, and it was a joy to meet with them. Many of them had already undertaken affirmative steps to employ staff of color and women in non-traditional areas, etc. So in part, the plan memorializes some of the things that were already ongoing in the school district, but it adds to that and then also gives you an opportunity to evaluate, monitor, and improve on those efforts. And also they came up with new efforts. But if you looked on page 77, next to the last page of in your packet of the plan, that is the listing of those liaisons that we want to thank, that they were very, very articulate, talented, and when I provided some orientation to them, myself and Janine Fukuda and Bonnie Gray, they took it to heart and put together some real good initiatives, some plans, actions, benchmark activities that I think will help improve your hiring, retention, and promotion of people of color and women, again, in non-traditional jobs. That's probably it about the process. Let me say this, what makes this different from some affirmative action processes is I did not come in and tell people what they should do. You already know what you have to do. I facilitated a process that allowed each individual division to come up with these strategies and benchmarks and action plans. And they just did a heck of a job, and I think going forward, the school district is going to really benefit from this plan. And I'll entertain any questions you have of me.
Do you want to do all the paint?
Yeah, we'll just do the plan
We'll
first.
just get through quickly the points that we're doing. So again, Jolly Patterson, I'm the General Counsel, Board Secretary for the district. I just wanted to make a couple of quick points about the plan. First of all, Stephanie Harper, who's the Human Resources Counsel, and I have reviewed the plan for legal compliance. As both Mr. Poe and Adair said, Traditionally, affirmative action plans tend to reflect the requirements of being a federal contractor, and so they tend to be more compliance-driven technical plans. This plan is a voluntary plan that the district is adopting to further the goals of the Oregon Minority Teachers Act and the board's affirmative action policy. So you will see that it borrows some of the stronger elements of traditional affirmative action plans, but there's also a lot of leeway in there in terms of how, as Mr. Adair said, each of the departments really had the flexibility to look at their department needs and programs and how to further the board's goals within their own hiring, employment, retention, promotion kind of practices. So it was, I've seen a number of these over the years, and this was a really strong process. I also really just wanted to make it clear that the board has very strong equal employment opportunity and non-discrimination policies. The affirmative action policy and plan is carried out within the context of those non-discrimination policies, which we strongly support and implement across the district. And at the same time, the plan gives us the opportunity to discover and understand more what some of those historic barriers are towards full inclusiveness in our system, and really address those in a proactive way. Finally, I just wanted to hit head on kind of a question that often comes up when you're talking about affirmative action, which is the difference between a quota and a goal. And a quota, which is not permissible under the law, tends to be a rigid, inflexible number. So a quota would be you have to make this many widgets within an hour, or you have to hit this sales number in order to get your commission. A goal is a much more, which is what we have here, are flexible, inclusive numbers that are meant to reflect the state to which a kind of an entity wants to get. So one of the definitions that I've always liked is that a goal is a program objective reflected in a number. So it's a way of kind of, you know, creating a goal, but not something that you have to hit or you're not in compliance. So, so I just know for the board and the public, that question often comes up, so I just thought I'd address it right head on. And again, we're gonna have, Mr. Murray's gonna speak for a bit, and then we're welcome to take your questions.
Good evening, board members, Superintendent Sean Murray, Chief Human Resources Officer. Now, the Minority Teachers Act calls for a 10% increase of all school districts by 2015. And so using baseline data based on 2012, the district had 538 teachers and administrators of color. And looking at our baseline data for October 2013, we experienced an increase of teachers and administrators of color. Essentially, if we look at the 10% increase from 2012, we're looking at an increase of teachers of color and administrators of color of 54 positions. And so as of 2013 baseline data, we have a remaining 25 positions to make up in order to reach our goal of 10% based on the 2012 data. Now, with the Minority Teachers Act, essentially, we are putting into place a number of recruitment strategies in order to increase the diversity of our teachers and administrators. The affirmative action plan strengthens the partnership with human resources and brings accountability to the organization as a whole. Our recruitment strategies this year, which, as you know, we have not been in a hiring mode for some time, has increased where we have been recruiting out of state. We have visited California, New Mexico, Texas. Also, our last trip was to Atlanta, Georgia as well, in which we were trying to increase the number of bilingual teachers as well as our teachers of color. We also we were also pleased to be awarded the Oregon Minority Teachers Act grant. Now, this proposal is focused on developing strong systems of teachers of color retention in Oregon. We will be collecting baseline data on retention of our teachers of color and developing programs that will better support their careers in PPS and hopefully retain them at PPS and the state of Oregon as well.
Thank you. Well, now, any questions that you have?
No questions? Director Morton?
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you for the information, the data that was provided, and for the presentation too. I mean, I've commented on this before. I think the most frustrating thing is that the Minority Teacher Act actually doesn't have any teeth, doesn't hold districts accountable or our school systems accountable to actually increase their goals set, but nothing that happens if you don't meet that goal. As I was going through the data, and I don't know if you're going to be talking about this more, if this is just general information.
I would say that once we've had the discussion about affirmative action, and Janine Fukuda will join me, and we'll be talking about the KPIs and the equity.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I guess I'm curious, based on what we've talked about already, I'm curious as to the where you see the gap, anecdotally even, between the 2012 data and today, and specifically, how do we draw the difference between what I would consider a fairly minimum goal of 10%, and really how do we reach a more reasonable goal? Because this data says that we are drastically overrepresented with white teachers in our district, based as compared to students of color in our district currently. So what's the goal that makes sense for us as a district versus what the minimum might be for the Minority Teacher Act?
Well, the overall goal of the Minority Teachers Act is for the districts to reflect the student population that they serve.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, our diverse student population is at 46%. Because of the moving number in terms of overall factors as far as retention, the challenges that the district face is essentially being able to fill all of those positions. And so looking at the state of Oregon, which is less than 46% diverse, essentially we have to go out of state in order to recruit teachers. Mm-hmm. And so looking at that, having a strategic game plan in terms of how we direct our recruitment efforts, doing more targeted recruitment in areas that have high diverse population, increasing our pool of diverse candidates. Now, essentially, the Minority Teachers Act calls for the districts to mirror their student population. It does not call for districts to not follow the standards and guidelines for our teacher hires. So essentially, we're looking for qualified teachers. We're looking in a bigger pool in terms of recruiting those teachers.
Okay. So is there a particular goal?
I don't think we've established individual proportional goals at this point, other than the larger aspirational piece. We look at labor market availability and move toward those two pieces. The other thing, we're in a unique situation, as we're all aware of, as the baby boomers like myself begin to move through the system, and we're replacing and bringing in new teachers to the system. Our ability to create the kind of labor pools that are more reflective of those populations allows us to be a bit more aggressive in looking at how, in fact, we increase and build toward the goals of the Minority Teachers Act.
Thank you.
Let me just say that affirmative action is an organizational development strategy, and this is going to have to be with you long term. There's no short-term fix. So even though the mountain seems very high to climb, you just have to take it 1 foot at a time and keep going. So I don't anticipate that the school district would meet the ultimate goal set out by the Oregon Minority Teacher Act within a couple of years, but I think it's realistic over a number of years to get there if you continue to have a plan like this that looks at strategies, benchmark activities, and plans.
Right. And again, I appreciate the information. I think I want to, and no one's saying that this isn't a challenge, and in terms of teacher education programs going out of state, there's an expense to that, there's time to that. I also think that there's, in organizations, I think present company included in many circumstances, we use sort of the ambiguity of no definitive goal, or we use sort of the challenge of it as excuses as to why we're not achieving something that we really need to be achieving, if we believe what is suggested in the Minority Teacher Act, which is, as Mr. Post said earlier, there is an incredible and definitive benefit of having teachers of color in front of classrooms in this district, both for white kids and for kids of color. So I believe that, and I think if we're looking at strategies to improve outcomes for students, to minimize achievement gaps, to maximize our graduation rates, that's one of those strategies I think we really need, as you say, be aggressive about. Oh.
Let me just say this and deal with the elephant that is always in the room when you have these conversations. One of which, nothing that the plan or anything we talk about should ever suggest that their ultimate goal isn't to hire the best capable, qualified teachers to put in front of every student we have. That's clear. We also believe our ability to attract and create pools that are diverse with very capable, qualified individuals is there. That increases our opportunities to make the kind of hires we want to do. And secondly, as a bureaucratic institution, governmental body, we're always very cautious and cognizant of the fact that we don't turn a goal into a quota, thus we will be sued. So we got to be as aggressive as we can within the context of recognizing that we're after a goal and be committed and consistent, which is why we set all the measures of one, coming to the superintendent, regularly talking about this within the context of her administration about how we're doing toward a goal that we want to achieve. And then her bringing this back to you, the policy board, to say, here's how we're doing, that becomes the check and balance. So we all got to work with this in a way that allows us to do it very aggressively, given the time we have to do it, with the recognition that we don't want to move to that place where people are saying we have hard, fast quotas.
Thank you.
Director Regan?
Hi, thanks for this report. It was great information. I had two questions that I wanted to ask you. One is, as I was reading through this, your tracker, there was a...
I think that's next, actually.
Oh, is this next?
We're just talking about the affirmative action plan.
Okay. So let me see if my questions pertain to that or to affirmative action.
Do you want a minute?
I had a question in the meantime.
go ahead.
That works. So thank you so much. Just want to make sure I'm understanding. So I'm looking at the sort of one of the core charts of the plan, I think on page 12, which has the job group analysis by women and total staff of color. So I want to make sure I'm understanding. So can you talk a little bit about the available percentage and what that means and how that's calculated? Is that the market? And so we have the available and then the actual and then the goal. So the goal of 44%, for example, for staff of color, that would reflect the diversity of student population. And then obviously understand what the actual is. But just the available, I wanted to make sure I understood that.
Page 62.
Oh, sorry.
It's on metric all the way through.
Yeah, I just picked out page 12 as sort of one of them.
Labor market, sure.
In terms of availability, that's looking at the labor market. In terms of the Metro Oregon, Portland area,
Okay.
In terms of teachers that would meet not the qualifications, but the licensure.
Okay.
In terms of our data market within the area. It also
Okay.
includes Vancouver, Washington as well.
Okay, so the Portland metropolitan area.
Yes.
Your information on who's licensed to fill those spots. Okay, thank you. I just wasn't sure on the technical staff. But what you're talking about is going beyond the Portland metro area to other states even, to be able to find folks, to expand that available pool.
And it's calculated for each different job group,
Yes.
dependent
Yes.
on the people qualified to fill that particular role, correct?
Correct.
So that
Yes.
each one is unique in its availability?
That is correct.
You
Okay.
also note on that page, each of the job groups that has an asterisk are the job groups that would be covered by the Oregon Minority Teacher Act.
So that's their classification of how they divide it out. Okay, thank you, that's really helpful. And can you also talk about how, sort of as this plan hopefully becomes a living document and it's continually kind of transparent and referred to and used by staff and seen by us and the public, how there's going to be sort of ongoing accountability and tracking and check-ins with this plan?
Part of the charge to my office is really to be the office that monitors, that it's part of what becomes the data and the information that the superintendent and her team look at as we have the conversation about how we're moving equity through the district, including our workforce, how we retaining employees, how we building that. That then becomes a part of the discussion that she gets to have with her direct reports. But are we moving? Are we making progress? What are the challenges we're experiencing? Where do we need modifications? So that becomes a part of our ongoing internal checks and balances, and then that becomes part of what is brought to you as a body as you relate to the superintendent under her domain and what you expect from her to have.
That's great. So we'll have this baseline and then we'll be able to
Yes.
sort of track over time how we're doing toward that,
Yes.
that goal. Okay, thanks.
And the teachers is specifically one of the named key performance indicators
Yes.
that you'll hear about in a
Yes.
minute. But
Right.
it's named,
Yes.
and we've got that longitudinally tracked already, and we'll
Yes.
continue to track it.
Yeah.
So hopefully
Right.
we accelerate that.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Dr. Buell?
Could you straighten something out for me? I'm confused, Sean. The available, it says, I'm just going to page 16, I think, 2012, 2013, and it says officials, administrators, managers. Up at the top, 158 total, 36 minimum, 6.4% available of page 17, I think.
It's the same table that Director
Yeah,
Beck
same one.
uses.
17, page 17. Sorry.
It's the same table that talks about the
13.
availability.
It's like
13, I think.
Page
Is it?
13.
It probably is. It's different on our
Yeah.
Okay.
electronic
Okay,
reader.
we've got the same one.
Okay, if you went to the top thing where it says 6.4% available, and then it says 8.9% actual, 11.4% is the goal for Black African American. Okay, so the actual is 8.9%. Is that the actual that we have now, correct?
Correct.
And the 11.4 is where we would like to have been, where we would like to be,
Correct.
Based on the population.
theoretically.
Yeah.
And the 6.4% is, so do I add that 6.4% to the 8.9% and get 13.3%, no, 15.3%?
The labor market.
Or and that makes 13.3 versus 11.4, or do I not add that 6.4 and it's separate? See what I'm saying? Is that an add-on to the actual?
This
No.
is the,
Or is that an available? In other words, if we were to reach that goal, we would need 2.5% of the 6.4, we would need 1/3 of the 6.4, basically?
So the 6.4% represents the availability of African-American officials and administrators in this area.
6.4% of what, Sean?
In what area?
No, I know in the area, official administrators, managers.
Portland.
Right, 6.4%. So, but what I'm asking is, if we took that, is it 6.4%? Is that figured on the same thing as the 8.9%? Or is that figured on a different
That's what
base?
we
So is it
actually have.
6.4% of the 158, like the 8.9% is 8.9% of the 158? So the 6.4%, is it 6.4% of the 158, or 6.4% of a different base?
All right, so the 8.9% is what we actually have.
That's 36 out of 158.
Correct.
Okay.
And then the goal, which is based on
student
And the student
population.
student population, is 11.4%.
Okay, that's, okay. That would give us a number about, not quite double 36, around 68. Okay, and the 6.4% is 6.4% of what?
6.4% represents the availability of African American officials and administrators and managers within the Portland metro area.
So is it 6.4% of the 158?
No, of the market, of the
the
labor
market.
market.
Of the labor market.
So of the people with
It's
those
6.4%,
credentials.
not 6.4% of the labor market.
Yes.
No, if the
Those
people,
credentials.
people with those credentials
6.4% of those with requisite skills
to do that
for
job.
this job group in the labor area.
So
That's
is that
what it
6 point,
represents.
is that 6.4% then, Mr. Adair, the same as the 8.9%, only 3.5% less? So I could add that together to get to the 11.4?
No.
Okay, so it's 6.4% of what?
Okay, of all the people in the statistical area, the Portland Metropolitan Statistical Area qualify to be officials and managers in the school district, that number is 6.4%.
6.4% of them are black African.
Are black
In the
African
community, yes,
Right.
African American.
Yeah.
6.4% of
6.4%.
of what, of everybody?
The qualified candidates.
So if I add everything up here, it comes out to 100%?
No.
No.
Okay, so it's 6.4% of, it's six.
That's just strictly your availability.
Yeah, but what
in the
I'm saying,
local
it's
area.
6.4% of what? It
Of-
can't be of everybody in the whole area who's looking for work.
No,
Or
who-
it can't be everybody degrees.
That is the availability percentage, the estimated availability of those in the Portland metropolitan area who are qualified to be officials and administrators
In a
that
school
are
district. In a school
African
district.
that are African American.
We don't have that.
We don't have
We
that.
don't have
information.
We don't have this,
We can
we don't
get
have
it.
the total number. It's only a percentage, we don't have the total number. We do have the numbers, but this is a summary giving percentages so that we can set the goals.
We can get
So,
that information
but
to
we-
you.
Try one more
yeah,
time
if you
and
want the
just let it
number.
go. Okay. You have 6.4%
Mhm.
of the what?
I don't know how to say it any differently.
Okay, say it the way you said it again, and
Okay.
then let me ask on that.
There's a body of people in the Portland metropolitan statistical area that are qualified
To do these jobs.
this job.
And 6.4%,
Of those.
6.4%
Of
is black,
those.
is black, okay.
6.4% are
Okay.
African American.
So of those that are all qualified,
Right,
6.4%.
in the local
Okay.
area.
All right, thank you very much. So
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
that makes sense to me, thank you. Appreciate you clarifying that, it's good.
Other questions?
I have a question.
Director Blau?
Just need to find it. First, thanks for this plan. It was really fun to go through and to see how each department is looking at it. And more excited than having a plan, I'm really excited to see how it changes over time to determine whether or not what strategies are effective and which strategies are not. So I appreciated that. One question I had, and it's pretty specific, it's in the HR plan. So Mr. Murray, this comes under your point is, and I tell you what page, it
Give us
says
the front.
page 43 on the bottom of the page I'm looking at. And the area of focus is grants focused on retention of teachers of color.
Yes.
And the planned action was creation of a teacher of color advisory committee will focus on culturally relevant pedagogy within schools that raise expectation of all educators and so forth. And I was just curious, as I was looking through the Office of Schools, this seemed like it could fit in both places. And I was curious how it landed here and what the thinking of that is, and will it transition to Office of Schools at some point, or?
Well, you know, the way it landed in HR is that essentially we saw the grant that was available and our staff applied for it, understanding that retention is just as important as recruiting teachers. And so, in looking at that, that's pretty much how it landed in the HR department. And specifically, we're going to be looking at a group of teachers of color to understand some of the challenges that they have with working in the district, and hopefully identifying those barriers to retaining them with the district and keeping them longer.
I wonder if there's an opportunity, do you see an opportunity to expand that learning then into the Office of Schools and how we're going district-wide with?
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, that information won't lie within the HR department. It definitely will be communicated to Office of Teaching and Learning as well, because, you know, that's the backbone essentially for their teachers, and ensuring that all the training that we do to during the course of our teachers, investing training, we want to be able to retain them as well. So once we glean that information, especially through surveys and meeting with teachers, we will be passing that information off to the Office of Teaching and Learning as well.
That's great. Just want to point out that HR's, which would make sense, HR's was really thorough. I really appreciated the effort that went into that.
Thank you.
One of the things we were saying, especially because this is an initial plan, is that the style of plan that we put together would increase the collaboration between the departments and HR. And as you can see, it will do that.
Dr. Regan, are you okay? Did you have a?
Fine, I'm going to wait till the next section.
No? Another one? Do you have another question? Dr. Buell?
It would seem to me on this chart, going back to the 6.4%, it would seem to me that if we had an actual number there, that could be two administrators of color. It could be, or in this case, Black or African American. It could be 200. I don't know. You see what I'm saying? That makes sense to you? 6.4%. Could be 2 people. It could be 200 people.
Well, it's a good question, and I didn't put the numbers together.
I know. I was just thinking that that would have been helpful in
consultant
this
did,
chart.
and we could certainly get you those numbers so that you'll have an idea of how many people that represents.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, because if you go up, if you're looking for 11.4, how many of those available people would you have to pick up to get to 11.4 of a goal, theoretically? Did you have to pick up? I don't know. It wouldn't, you can't tell. I can't tell from 6.4. See, that's all I'm saying.
Right.
That's where I was kind of confused, I think, but that's fine. That's not. Could you explain to me, or someone, explain to me how we decide how we decide around these goals? These are not quotas, but how do we decide? For instance, we have 75% approximately of the elementary school teachers, and that's just K-8, are white. You have a goal of 49%. Now we're not gonna probably fire a third of our elementary teaching staff to get to that. So one of the things, and I talked quite a bit today, and I really appreciate him taking the time with me, Lorenzo, one idea is to create a bigger pool. That's the idea. Is that the idea? What else do we do to move in the direction that we want to move? I mean, we could hire all white men and meet that goal, or we could, if it came down to an elementary school white man, and we're going to move up to the goals, and Mr. Dares, he can just ace this question. He's just been waiting for this all night. Well, yeah, the question is, what are we doing, though? Is the question, not should you be doing or something? And you come down to a white male who's going to increase here. You come down to a black female, which is an increase. I mean, do we mess with that at all? Do we how do we actually look at that when those problems?
Each case is going to be individual.
Yeah, that's
each pool is going to be individual, and each hiring decision is going to be made. And you know, for one thing, a lot of times people say, what do we do when people are equally qualified? I don't even believe in that. There's always some difference between applicants based relating to their skill and capability to do a job. But again, the key is knowing what your goal is, increasing the diversity of your pools, and the rest will take care of itself. people are going to be able to compete. If you're going out and getting qualified applicants of color or women in non-traditional roles, they're going to be able to compete. I believe that. And so I don't have to answer the question, what do you do if you get this, that, and the other? Over time, you're going to see that improvement in the numbers of the groups that you're targeting. So,
can we recruit directly persons of color directly into positions?
well, they got to go through the same process as everybody else, and they have to compete. And I believe that you can find qualified people, staff of color and women and so forth, and get them in the pools, and they'll be able to successfully compete. That's, you know, I believe that.
What if you think they've already successfully competed? In other words, you're going, this would be a great person to have teaching in our school. Do we have to take them and put them into a pool, or can we go out and hire them?
You want to talk to apprentices?
So we have a hiring process that every candidate has to go through, which includes possible interviewing process where we're assessing the knowledge, skills, and ability to do the job. Point blank, hiring someone based on race is illegal, Director Buell. And so essentially, we're looking for the best suited candidate for the position, and we assess those skills and make a determination. Now, we do increase our pool as far as going out and recruiting in areas that have large, diverse candidates that meet the qualifications for the position. Now, by doing that, that does increase the possibility or the opportunity of hiring someone of color, but we do not make decisions based on race.
Other questions?
Yeah, I do.
So
I
Director Curler?
Sean, you mentioned going out and on these recruiting trips, and before you got here, we had Dave Porter from the Public was talking about the lack of Hispanic teachers, and so clearly you're working on that. How could you provide some a little bit of color on how those trips are working? I mean, are they being successful, and what do you actually do on those trips?
So I don't want to give away necessarily our secret.
Okay.
Okay.
Fair enough.
That's hilarious. But we're doing all types of strategies in order to increase the opportunity for hiring diverse teachers. So, you know, in terms of looking at bilingual teachers, we're looking out of state. Not only in the state of Oregon, because everyone in the state of Oregon is looking for bilingual teachers as well, and looking at the availability of bilingual teachers, you're gonna have to go out of state. And so we have concentrated on areas that have large bilingual populations, and essentially, how do I put this, recruited in areas where we would gather the most diverse candidates.
And are you pleased with the results of what you've been doing?
You know, the district hasn't been in a hiring mode like this in a while. As you know, we had over 400 vacancies. So this created an opportunity for us to really be broad in terms of our diversity recruiting efforts. And, you know, part of it is you have to sell the job. And I actually went on a recruiting trip to Atlanta, and we had the opportunity to meet with some of the candidates and individually. And the first question I kept being asked was, what's Portland like for a person like me? That's a difficult question to answer. And so understanding that, you know, we have to sell the equity programs that the district has. Also, people are very surprised by the district being 46% students of color as well. They really didn't, you know, no one thinks of Oregon that way, or Portland. So that creates an opportunity for folks to say, hey, maybe I might want to come to Portland. You know, that's part of the selling point of it. And then looking at retention as well. We're doing a number of things to welcome these teachers. It's not just to recruit them from different states. We want to be able to set up a process that welcomes them to the district and to the city as a whole. So we partner with different groups like Partners in Diversity that does a quarterly welcoming of professionals of color to the city of Portland. We're also looking at teaming with the Office of Equity and putting together a mixer for new teachers of color who are coming to Portland, so they can actually meet one another and hopefully build relationships in order to retain them here as well.
Thank you.
Director Buell?
So on the trip to Atlanta, I'm still trying to sort this all out. So on the trip to Atlanta, if we'd have bumped into a guy who was a good teacher of physics, and we thought, wow, this guy's really good. I talked to him, this guy's fabulous, this guy's gonna be a great teacher. We can't offer him a job.
Why not, Director Pugh?
In Atlanta, because we haven't put him into our pool yet.
So essentially,
I mean, that's what I'm wondering. So if we went out to, let me put this more directly then. If we went out down to, we took a trip down to Berkeley, and we found, wow, here's a really top-notch candidate, we think they're great, who happens to be African-American, we'll say, and can speak 3 different languages. Well, we got to bring him back and put him in our pool and mess with him and have him go through the same process, or could we hire him on the spot?
So actually, we would have them apply online because our recruitments are open. In addition to them applying, we're constantly doing interviews for the position. So like our recruitment trips in Atlanta, LA, New Mexico, Texas, we actually did on-the-spot interviews of candidates.
Did we hire anybody on the spot?
We offered letters of intent to a number of candidates, yes.
So we can go out and hire people without putting them into our pool.
They were in our pool.
How'd they get in the pool?
We actually had them apply online at that site.
So they went online on the site, and 10 minutes later, after they're online, we hire them, and they are in the pool?
No,
I mean, I'm not being critical here. I'm really trying to see how this actually works.
Oh, Director Buell, we actually interview them. We take a team of administrators with us. We take our interviewing process on the road. So essentially, we're taking the district to them instead of them coming to the district.
Could we take our interview process to Vancouver, Washington, and interview somebody and hiring them on the spot?
Yes. We actually offered early letters of intent. Essentially, when they had the Oregon Professional Educators Conference at the Oregon Convention Center, we did interviews on the spot there as well.
And offered some people on the spot?
Yes. Letters of intent.
So we could do what you and I have talked about many times. Is it still possible for us to do what I've talked about, which is go out and figure out who the top candidates are in colleges up and down the West Coast, and go out to those people individually, take them to dinner, tell them how much we want them, and offer them a job?
Oh, yes. Essentially, in looking at the model that you and I talked about, when we were in Atlanta, we actually attended a job fair and then also had a mixer session where we invited some of the, we call VIP candidates, and got a chance to meet them and talk more about Portland. That's the start of the relationship in order to recruit and retain folks.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Thank you
Thanks
so
very
much for
much
that additional information.
Yeah, I was
Sorry.
going to say, thank you very much for that, Sean. That was very helpful, and appreciate that. And thank you to the rest of you for this very important work and very good.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Adair.
And ask Janine Fukuda to step up to the podium with me. But before we do it, I would like to ask a personal point of note on this topic.
Sure.
1980-83, the district created the Affirmative Action Plan. I want to thank you, Director Buell, for being a part of a district that had the foresight to see the need of diversifying our workforce. 2000 to 2005, sitting in the seats that you sat in, for 4 years, I tried very hard to get an affirmative action policy and plan. Did not happen. So I want to thank you, this body, this board of superintendents, for finally stepping up and recognizing the transparency and strategies and the need to create the kind of workforce that our students need. So I just want to say thank you for that. It's been a long time coming forward. I said, so I just want to say thank you. Yeah. So I'll turn it over to Janine. We'll talk about our equity plans, our key performance indicators, and then we do want to spend some time talking about a very exciting project that we have with PSU, because one of the questions that I often get asked, and others I know get asked, how do you know if this is working? And what we haven't had the ability to do from an evaluative standpoint, to really begin to lay out evaluatively what we're doing, how effective what we're doing, and how it's working. And that's part of what we're excited about looking at with PSU. So I'll turn it over to Janine.
Good evening, Directors and Superintendent Smith. I'm Janine Fukuda, the Assistant Director in our Office of Equity and Partnerships, and I'm really happy to be here this evening. While you heard some details about our affirmative action plan, what I'm going to quickly do is just briefly give you an overview of the other items in your packet, like Mr. Poe just explained. So in your packets, you received a copy of our January 2014 Equity Plan Progress Update, which is that big sheet of paper that looks like this. This document lists the key actions in our annual equity plan that tie to the 18 priority strategies that are identified in our 5-year plan. For each of the planned actions, you will see progress towards goals through January 2014. Green indicates on track, yellow indicates generally on track with considerations, and red indicates behind schedule. Much of the content in the plan will be familiar to you since you've been seeing a lot of this work throughout the year, so it shouldn't be surprising. We typically report results through January and early spring, and year-end results typically are reported in the fall, and that's simply because it allows us time to report on all the activity that happens over the summer. It also gives us time to collect year-end data for all of the different areas so that we can compare apples to apples, which is why a lot of the information for year-end is not in this report. It will be forthcoming. I believe we're scheduled for October. Let's see. Also in your packets is an introduction to the Equity Key Performance Indicators, or KPIs. While progress towards our racial equity goals are ultimately measured by the district's ability to eliminate the racial predictability in our student achievement across our milestones data, these equity KPIs are another system-level measure of our progress towards our equity goals. The 7 KPIs identify racial opportunity gaps in our system that we believe contribute to the student achievement disparities. I won't go through all of them since they're in your packet, but going forward, you can expect to see these KPIs more frequently in our presentations and our evaluation of our work. The KPIs illustrate district-wide multi-year trends similar to our milestones. And in order to improve the outcomes, we will analyze each KPI, looking at school-level data and identifying both areas for increased support as well as promising practice. The recent discipline data overview is a good example of the type of analyses that we will start to provide for each of the key performance indicators. And last but not least, we wanted to share an exciting partnership we have developed with Drs. Moti Hara and Esperanza de la Vega from the School of Education at Portland State University. And I also just wanted to acknowledge that Dr. Esperanza de la Vega is here in the audience tonight. Thank you for being here. Our partnership is officially the PSU-PPS Equity Research Partnership. The partnership will study the relationship between culturally responsive practices and strategies and student achievement outcomes within our PPS schools, which makes for a really exciting partnership. We will look at longitudinal data collected from PPS schools through our annual equity surveys, as well as our Safe and Civil School Survey, as well as longitudinal school and student level data, with the ultimate goal of understanding the common factors that are leading to success in our PPS schools. Drs. Hara and de la Vega are experts in quantitative and qualitative research methods with a focus on equity and social justice in education. The PSU-PPS partnership was one of 9 recipients of ODE's Culturally Responsive Pedagogy and Practices grant. This concludes my very brief overview. I know there's a lot of information in your packets. We'd like to open it up for questions, and while Mr. Poe and I probably do not have all the answers, we have lots of people here with us who can hopefully help.
Board questions? Dr. Blau?
I was curious if we could, one, I'm just thankful for this. This is, again, a really great example of systemic review of what are we doing and how are we progressing. I mean, as you pointed out, we have our milestones, which are the ultimate evaluator of how we're doing, but this gives us some performance measures on our way that should help know whether or not we're going to make that progress that we're looking for. Okay. I was really curious. I'm really looking for the update already in October. So you give us the information. I already want the more more information that's yet to be coming. But I was struck by the information about ELL and the IRT, the Intervention Resource Team, that's indicated that in January 2014, the baseline data suggests 70% of students referred to IRT or students of color, and the progress on that was the baseline data was so alarming that we decided to restructure the entire special education department in order to mobilize services and supports to buildings in a more effective and responsive way. And I'm just curious to understand a little bit more what that looked like and what that means, and not having the data maybe quite yet, but how are we feeling about how effective that was?
Sure, I'm looking back to see if Melissa would be willing to step up. Mary Pearson, our Director of Special Education, just couldn't be here tonight, so hopefully Melissa can shed some light and I can share a little of what I know.
So when we look at our IRT data and the referral data associated with our special education students and the alarming rate of students of color being referred for special education, we took a step back to look at really two pieces of information. One is what are the indicator data that is leading us to a special education referral in the first place? So are we having enough overtime data? Are we actually tracking the interventions, the instructional moves that teachers are doing in the classroom and identifying whether or not kids are responding to that work? So that's one component. The other component is really looking at how do we expand a co-teaching model so that special education students are within the classroom. When that happens, then every classroom has more supports within the classroom. So a third grade teacher could have a specialist in that classroom because there are 4 special ed students in that classroom. Also benefiting from that are the students who may have been referred for special education services but don't necessarily need an individualized education plan in order to be successful in school. So you're actually supporting more than the 4 on an IEP. You're also supporting students who may be at risk but not necessarily in need of an individual education plan. So we've really looked at how we reconstruct our services to students and are looking at how we further expand that.
And feedback to date has been positive, or?
It's been positive,
Mixed,
and it's
yeah.
been mixed. You know, it's a scary thing to look at things differently, and when you look at things differently, you don't always look at them through the same lens, through the same perspective. So part of what it identifies for us are opportunities for us in supporting teachers in areas of behavior, supporting teachers in professional development areas that we frankly haven't had capacity to support in the way that we would like to do. So it's highlighted great opportunities for us. And what I will also say is our schools that are experiencing the co-teaching model, the feedback from staff has been so positive on wanting to expand that it's spreading into other schools as well.
My other question, I'm not sure who this is for, so you guys can kind of be conductors of who takes the next one, is actually a teaching and learning question. So Ms. Goff, this might be that to your side. I just realized that they're categorized nicely on the left-hand side for me. It's the strategy of providing school leaders and central support staff with school-based professional development on implementing culturally responsive positive behavior support systems. And this category is yellow. And it talks about 2 high schools participated kind of in a pilot. And I'm just curious, was it offered to all high schools, and why did some of the other folks not participate? Or can you just tell me a little bit more about?
So I'm sorry, I didn't catch all of what you said.
It's okay.
So,
so teaching and learning, page 5 of 13. It's priority strategy 6. Sorry, I'll wait till, you with me?
Got it.
And so then it talks about providing professional development, culturally responsive PBIS. And it talks about 2 high schools having participated in a pilot. I'm just curious, did we only offer it as a pilot? Did we target certain high schools?
Yeah, so part of our challenge is having the capacity to offer it to all of the schools. So we explored it, began the work with 2 of our high schools, are looking at how we can expand that further as we move forward. We have had, with our culturally relevant PBIS work, we have had some really positive indicators of success and buy-in by staff and our PBIS coaches have leaned in with our racial equity coaches as well to learn how we can continue to do a better job.
Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Regan?
I think I have 3 questions on this. So I'll ask the first question is how are we working with our teachers union and our teachers around this equity work? And specifically, as I was looking through your plan, there was one strategy that says define, identify, and build capacity for culturally relevant instruction. So that made me think of that. And another one was engage every teacher, school-based administrator, and central office-based administrator in monthly equity professional development. So my question is how are we working directly with our teachers union? Are they on board, or are we working with individual teachers in schools? How are we pulling teachers into this whole discussion?
I'll try to address it from the office perspective. Part of that answer is embedded in the number of places where we interact with the PAT across the district. We attempt to make all those things that we do from a policy standpoint or operational standpoint, information given to our PAT. We also have, and it's chaired by the superintendent and I, an Equity Inclusion Council, that we've asked for a representative from PAT to begin to sit on the council with us, because that is where we look at district-wide what we're doing with equity and inclusion as we begin to build that. Throughout the system, when we start to talk about professional development training and others, the effort to involve the PAT is part of that process. Always mindful that we're trying to continue to build a strong relationship to get teachers and PATs buy-in and participation. Is it as great as we want it to be? No. But you always have to continue to work to improve relationships. But generally, I mean, when we talk to teachers, you are going to have a mixed level in this kind of work as you move forward. But I don't think I've ever ran into a teacher that was in disagreement with the notion of wanting to close the achievement gap and work for the betterment of kids.
So I would just use an example. One of the opportunities that we had this year was the work around personalized learning. And we asked the teachers union, the head of the teachers union, for recommendations of teachers who could serve on that personalized learning team for us throughout the school year. And so all of the teacher members were recommended by PAT leadership to participate in that work. One of the things that I was most struck by in that work was how consistently, regardless of race of the participants of the teachers, how consistently they brought up racial equity and whether or not the pedagogy that we were seeking was actually going to be culturally responsive to our students.
So that's really encouraging.
It's an anecdote.
Great. So I have another question, which is your priority strategy is partner with culturally specific community organizations to provide culturally responsive supports for students and families of color. So I'm recalling a few years ago that we used to do a lot of the numbers so people. I'm sorry, it's on page 3 of 13, strategy number 2. Partner with culturally specific community organizations to provide culturally responsive supports for students and families of color. So I'm recalling a few years ago that we did a lot of our family outreach through Portland Public Schools staff people. And then we kind of shifted our strategy and we were using the help and services of culturally specific organizations to help us in this work, but we also had our own internal staff. And so I'm curious where the balance is now and how we know which one is the right approach.
We maintain the balance in terms of our internal staff and our culturally responsive contractors. We continue to do that. We maintain that balance. We have forged a greater integration and collaboration amongst the two groups to really leverage and maximize our impact to communities and families of color. We can get you more of an evaluative look at what they do numerically, but I'm not in the position to say one way or the other which one is better than the other. We do know they both share and bring to the table a great value, because there's value in having those who sit inside of the district be those who reach out to a community, because there is some comfort in knowing the person who's reaching out to them are part of the district. But there's also equal value by community partners who live and work and understand the communities which they work in. So the model and the balance has been very good. We can get you more numerical data to tell you about where we believe and what we see as actually the outcomes we want. But just from the basic outline of are we reaching the contractual goals, yes, we're doing that. We can get that information to you and do a deeper analysis.
Yeah, I know there was a pretty big discussion at the time, so I'm just kind of curious.
So, and part of this was this was during a budget cutting, and there was some framing of an either or, and what the really strong message is, it isn't an either or, it's really different, because part of what we get with the contracting is you not only get, you leverage a whole organization who has relationships with families that we're able to be part of, like a really broad set of relationships that then benefit the relationship with PPS, and the voices internally, as Lorenzo just said, end up really mattering in terms of who they connect to and the relationships with individual families that are language specific and culturally specific totally matter. So we're really building, how do we have a strong both and, but partnership and internal capacity, and we don't have enough of either. So like that's the other thing, we have way more demand of where this would be a high leverage strategy that we're still just fledgling in terms of our ability to meet the demand, I would say. But the both and is truly, and we've been working more to have that be part of a single strategy as opposed to feeling like two separate things. And that's really our effort right now, is how is that part of the same strategy.
And I think part of our success, part of our success in expanding the dual language immersion programs at multiple sites as we did, which was a larger expansion than we had initially thought we were able to undertake, was largely due to both internal and external culturally specific partners in making that happen.
Good. Yeah, I just hadn't heard an update recently, so that's helpful to know. And then my final one is on your equity key performance indicators, which is just this 2-page memo. You list your 7 indicators that you're measuring, and this is more of a comment, I think, more to you, Superintendent Smith. One of the things that I'm more and more curious about is, as we talk about college and career ready, I'm looking for more feedback on, I guess from PCC and from our 4-year universities on whether, as we're graduating kids, they actually are college or career ready, and in particular college ready. And whether or not we're measuring at all who is taking remedial classes and what the demographics of the groups are that are still having to take remedial classes after they graduate. Because I'm hearing it's a fairly large number still, and I'm curious to know what that looks like. So I think it's probably, and maybe it could be an indicator at some point, but I guess I'm wanting to know if we're tracking that information pretty carefully as kids are graduating and we have those conversations in place with our universities and PCC.
So, and actually one of the things that we are engaged in right now is a pilot project actually that started with Roosevelt, Madison, and Franklin, and PCC, Cascade, and Southeast Campus, where we were looking at math specifically.
Yes.
And what's the, how do we reduce the barriers, but actually have more connectivity between the curriculum, but also not use the testing as the avenue for how we place kids at PCC, but more what are they accomplishing with us, so that we're being able to gauge the accomplishment within PPS and not ending up putting kids, and that we're doing the remedial work, so that by the time kids are at PCC, we are not placing them in remedial classes that they never get out of. Right. And like, so we've got deep faculty to faculty work going on right now. That's now been expanded to the 6 districts and is still with math, but doing it across the 6 districts with PCC and Mount Hood. So we're looking at then hopefully expanding that to other curricular areas, but we're trying to understand it at a faculty to faculty and institution to institution. How do we reduce the barriers? Good. So it goes direct, and we will be measuring this because there's a grant that we're using that will have metrics that speak exactly to what you're talking about.
Great. So I think at some point I'd love to get more.
We'll do more on this.
On that.
We will do more on this particular project. It's been an exciting project.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we have principals and teachers so that we really, part of our intent at the beginning was how do we understand this at a school level? and have those 3 schools develop something we can then replicate so that we can increase dual credit offerings across our whole system, because we've had such benefit from what's happened with PCC and Jefferson.
Right.
And there we've had faculty exchanges where PCC faculty come over and teach at Jefferson, our Jefferson faculty go teach at PCC and really understand, okay, what's the, so we're doing a lot of exploring how we build real substance into the dual credit opportunity for kids and expand it.
Good. Thanks.
Thank you so much for all this information. And I just, reading through all of it, I had mixed feelings or reactions. On the one hand, I was, continued to be so pleased to see the level of detail and just this embedded and living throughout our district and growing over time. But then on the other hand, and I appreciate that you built into it the stark reality of the key performance indicators, and as you note several times in the report, there's just unacceptable, the numbers that you see here. The one, though, we do have, if I'm reading this correctly, that we do have a positive trend in the teachers indicator, increasing the diversity, as we were just talking about through all the efforts that are underway, but all the others, not so. So I just, that's, so it continues to be the urgency, and how do we move this through, and how do we as a board demonstrate that urgency and lead for change, which is why I was super excited to see, one of the reasons I was super excited to see the research partnership piece. We've mentioned a number of times about how do we know what works, what are the investments that we can make that will really make a difference in changing those performance indicators and changing outcomes for our students and for the whole district. So super excited to see that moving forward, appreciate that. And I didn't have specific, and it was just more my overall keep going, but we're not going fast enough, and how can we support you all in changing this reality.
Director Buell?
On section 5 under teaching and learning, it's the one that Director Reagan referred to. Define, identify, and build capacity for culturally relevant instruction. Now, does this include curriculum, culturally relevant curriculum, just instruction? I'm not sure what build capacity for, define, identify, and build capacity. It has anything to do with actually doing it. I have no idea. And when I go across the chart, I come up to the 2014 progress indicators, and it's relative rate of disciplinary exclusion.
That's a different.
Is that a different chart? 214? Okay, that's okay. Each Strand 3 Care team designed and implemented an expansive model. How many three care teams did we have? Are we doing this district wide? What is the, I don't, we did the care, how many people did it? I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of lost on how we're doing that. Thank you for pointing that out. That doesn't make any sense.
We'll let Cynthia McLeod, as our Assistant Director for Equity Professional Development, talk about the CARES model, and also give you some information about what we're excited about expanding the CARE model and looking at making our ability to stabilize it so that we can continue this work throughout the district. So let me turn it over to Cynthia.
Good evening. My work, a portion of my work focuses on the CARE work, and CARE, the letters in CARE are collaborative action research for equity, and the focus of the CARE work is to make it possible for the teacher to focus more directly on his or her instruction and the decisions that they make about what they teach, how they teach, what they use to teach, and those kinds of decisions. So it's both instruction and it's curriculum, but the direct focus is on the teacher and the decision-making powers of the teacher in the classroom.
So do we have materials that we work from? How many teachers out of our 3,000 were in the CARE program?
Currently we have 11 schools that were the very first CARE schools. And so those schools have gone through the two years of seminars. There are 6 training sessions. And then there are on-site observations done by our equity TOSAs. And that goes on for 2 years. There are 2 teachers per school and an administrator. So that was the beginning, as the 11. Those schools are now at a point where they are expanding their CARE process across their building. And so all the teachers in the building are participating in that process. We added another 21 schools this year who went through the first half of the CARE seminars. That's the first 3, and the on-site observations with our equity TOSAs, going to their school, observing them in the classroom, and giving them feedback on what they were seeing. Those 11 schools, or excuse me, those 21 schools will finish the second set of 3 seminars this fall, or this year, over the course of this next school year. And so they will have a seminar, and then they will have the opportunity to have the equity TOSAs go out to their building, meet with them around their instruction, observe them in the classroom, and give them feedback. We're also this year adding the remainder of our schools, which there are 51 schools that will start out fresh in the fall. They will have the first 3 seminars and the same on-site observation and classroom observation by our equity TOSAs and feedback on their instruction. So this year, we will have all of our schools involved in CARE, but at 3 different entry points.
No, seminar is how long?
A seminar is all day, so there are 3 all-day seminars, and then they have 3 site visits by our equity TOSAs, and at those site visits, the equity TOSAs meet with the teachers on the CARE team. The teacher talks about what instruction they're working on, which of the 4 R's they're working on, and the 4 R's are relevance, realness, rigor, and relationships. So the teacher decides which of those 4, and over the course of their time, they do focus on all 4. They plan their lesson around that particular strategy. They then have the equity TOSAs come in to observe the lesson that they're doing and give them feedback.
So if you planned a lesson around the real strategy, what?
Around, it might be rigor, it might be realness, it might be
If you did realness, what might you be looking for?
What you might be looking for is whether or not the ways in which the teacher teaches the lesson makes sense to the student, and whether or not it takes into account who the students in that class are, what their strengths are, what their challenges are. So that might be the focus of realness. Because sometimes if students are not engaged in learning that means something to them and that's real in their existence and real in their lives and has a real application, there's much less chance that they'll be successful.
Now, do they do, how does that dovetail with such things as the Common Core curriculum?
One of the...
Which isn't particularly culturally relevant.
Exactly, and that is why it is so important that our teachers have a focus of relevance and realness and rigor in the ways in which they think about the lessons as they plan and execute the lesson. Because without that focus from the teacher, you're absolutely correct. The Common Core may or may not be relevant to a student, but that's the significant component, is how the teacher views the student in relationship to what he or she is going to be teaching.
Do they do some things like, for instance, suppose I had kids in my class who just came over from Syria, and they spoke decent English, but not great English, maybe? And I have, let's say it's a 5th grader. So what would I learn from the seminar, keeping it real to that kid? But I mean, what do they give me specific help on? Do we have some place where we give teachers specific help on something like, geez, you've got a kid from Syria, here's the cultural background, things that will help you to deal with their parents, are we doing any of that type of culturally relevant instruction where we're pointing it at various groups or various backgrounds?
Because we have a variety of students in many of our classes, the purpose of our work with teachers is to increase the teacher's awareness and the teachers understanding that it matters whether or not they take into account a student's culture when it comes to their achievement. And so it's about focusing on the teacher developing a lens that will make it possible for the teacher to notice that every student in my class isn't the same, and that my students who just came to my classrooms from Syria, it's going to be really important that I find out as much about their culture as possible. That might mean parent conversations. It might mean the culturally specific liaison in that school having conversation with me. There are lots of ways that we can gather that information. But what's important is that I know as the teacher, that's important for me to do, and that's part of my job.
Do we support them in some way? So if I had 2 kids in my class, say they were twins and they were in my class from Syria in the 5th grade, would I get, would the district say, here's some things you need to know? Or would they say, you know, you need to be relevant with these kids, so you need to do some research on their background and so forth in the middle of all the other things that you're doing? I mean, do we have places where we actually go out and teach teachers how to respond to children of various different backgrounds, situations? Are we doing any of that?
We have cultural liaisons in schools that are able to help teachers with that level of specificity. That level of specificity is not a part of the seminars that we do, because then we would have to teach a different seminar for each cultural group.
Right.
But our role is to create that awareness in the teacher, to create that need and that understanding that it's not just an okay if I do and okay if I don't, that it is significant to every student's learning to see themselves reflected in the classroom instruction, and reflected in the resources used in the classroom. All of those things are important to a student's achievement, and it's the teacher's role. And of course, as a district, we provide resources, we provide training, but it begins with the teacher making the decision that that is something that's important. Are we
embedding in the curriculum itself historical background material, like the background material for history of children of Latino background in America? There's been, are we embedding historical things in some way? Do we have a historical curriculum that we teach people how to teach and so forth like that?
Our equity TOSAs work in collaboration with the content TOSAs in the Office of Teaching and Learning, as well as in the ELL department, for that purpose, to support and to help with resources, to help with the thinking around the curriculum that we put into classrooms, the resources that we put into classrooms, those sorts of things. So our TOSAs do work with the Office of Teaching.
Do we have social studies, culturally relevant social studies curriculum in the 5th grade? Where I think the 5th grade is probably still United States history to some degree. Do we, if I'm a 5th grade teacher at Rosa Parks School, do I have, and I've got 10 kids in my class of Latino background, is there places I can go within the district to pull in resources that deal with historical background of Latinos in America?
I'm going to give Melissa an opportunity to answer that question.
Right. Try and make this my last question. It's very interesting. I'm very interested in this.
So we have, over time, invested in some teacher-created materials that reflect more cultural relevancy. So History Alive may be one of the curricula that you've heard that we collaborated on. One of the big changes that has happened in the last 2 years in PPS that was not in place prior to that time is we have changed our procurement processes. So the expectation now for any curricular materials that we are purchasing, our students are able to see themselves in it. We have an unbiased racial history that's represented within the curricular materials that we purchase. To be fair and accurate, however, most of our curricular materials need updating, and we are now at a time where we get the opportunity to do so.
Okay. Are we in the process of trying to do that, to update them?
Yeah, we are. So, for example, this year we're in the English Language Arts 612 adoption.
English Language Arts this year, but not necessarily history.
Not everything.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure. Director Morton?
Thank you. So I think this is a, you know, it's always wonderful. You have the celebration of an equity policy, a racial educational equity policy, and then the enormous task of putting it into not just a document. That's the easy part. It's the putting it across a huge district. So I definitely appreciate the effort that it takes to do that. I think as I go through, I mean, I first want to say too much yellow for me, and I want to empower both the superintendent and the staff to move that yellow to green and see strong advancement in each of these areas, because I don't think we can, kids are waiting. That's the reality of it. I think the other thing that that I'm feeling is the you know, the real desire. I'm hungry to see some evidence of our efforts, and I know that comes in certain times, and I'm eager to see that. But as I wait, I'm also growing sort of increasingly disenfranchised with what I would consider to be sort of exclusively mainstream strategies towards best serving students of color and underserved students. Those, and because those strategies really have proven to fall short and miss the mark, I think those strategies are oftentimes, or at least now, even more obvious given the pretty rapid improvements that we've seen that are not mainstream efforts, but are culturally specific, community-based efforts. Primarily outside of the classroom, but also in strategies that affect inside the classroom. There are a number of examples that we can, within underserved communities identified in our racial educational equity policy, that we can see have made an impact in our district. I think one specifically that we intentionally contract with is Self-Enhancement, Inc., and the work that's happening at Jefferson and the whole school model strategy that they have. So that's one example, but there are many others that exist. So I'm looking forward to the evidence of this, and I want us to hold the work that we're doing accountable based on that evidence. I think the other component in this, and I know this is also board work too, is the relationship between our 8% equity set aside in our budget, or not set aside, but reinvestment, and the relationship that resource has specifically to addressing issues facing our underserved student population. That's something that I'll be looking at more and more and more, particularly as we get towards the budget process. So, no questions, just comments. Thank you.
Well, let me say this, Board Member Morton, I concur with you. Appreciate your comments. The sense of urgency to resolve this is something of the struggle, the tension that we in the district confront every day. Years we've seen the trend lines and recognizing that we really need to get on this, but the recognition that's going to take more time than we really want to give it because of the urgency, and the willingness to extend our hand to those who are not necessarily a part of the building to help us in figuring out those strategies, and we're making those efforts. I wish the one thing I could do is sit there and say, this time next year, we've dealt with this. I would love to do that. I don't think there would be no person more happy in the world than Lorenzo if we could do that. But the recognition is it's going to take that kind of time, because what we want to do is we want to do it right. We want to make sure the sound and the foundation is laid so that once we all go, those trend lines are continuing. We've wiped out the disparity. So I appreciate and hope the board continues to hold us to fire to make these lines change, but a recognition this district is working incredibly hard to try to do that, And part of my tension inside the organization is to be the one that says the balance between saying we're doing good and making an effort and saying we're still not doing enough is a real interesting balance for someone that want to say, dang, we're seeing pockets where we're seeing growth and gains. So maybe what we got to do is make sure that we're highlighting more of that as people come to the board. But with the recognition, we got so much more to do. And so that tension we all live in, but with the board continue to say, and the superintendent continue to say, we understand that you're making efforts, and we understand that you're making gains, but we want more. Will help keep us moving in that direction. So thank you.
Right. I think it's an ROI. All of us think about our return on the investment that we're making, and so we're anxious. We want to see that needle move.
Yes,
so you know that. So, Dr. Buell.
This is not directed at you, Lorenzo, who I think are doing what you're supposed to be doing and doing a good job of it, but I still think we're focusing too much on this equity effort on adults, not enough on what's taking place in our classrooms. And when we talk about building capacity, we're not talking about actually doing those things. I think it's wonderful that we're going out and trying to teach teachers how to work within this particular area. That's great stuff. But I want to get down into those classrooms and get that equity down there. And I don't see us doing that, and I don't see us moving even in that direction. We talk about it, and talk about it, and I'm not talking about you guys, I'm talking about us. But we don't do it. And it's time, and I've sat here for a year now and said, hey, I'd love to work with you guys on this, I'd love to do this, I'd love to work on these things, I'd love to get this stuff in the classroom. And what I hear is, we're doing this or this, but not really down into that classroom and deal with what takes place there. That's what I think we need to do. I would love to do it. And it doesn't, if we look through this stuff, I don't see much that has to do with getting down into the classroom. The stuff with the teachers is excellent. Let's teach those teachers about relevance and reality and why it's important. I have no problem with that because that's good for a lot of teachers. A lot of teachers don't need it. A lot of teachers are wonderful already. We all know that. But in the classroom, that's where we should be, and we're not. And it's where I think we should be.
So did you say 50 schools next year adding care teams?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's
That will
all.
be
So
all
we
of
want
us.
to.
Across all the schools.
Terrific.
And
So it's
actually,
every
Director
school.
Buell, I just would like to respond to that because I think part of the opportunity for us in the coming year is to create some opportunities for the board to get out into schools and actually experience where some of the things we're talking about that you hear about in board meetings, where they're happening. We organized some pretty wonderful visits last year to classrooms and to schools, but it was a team from central office that included teaching and learning, ELL, special ed, regional administrators, myself, and we went and saw some of the content-based ELD work that was going on in classrooms, looked at what the data was in the school, saw teachers in action, talked to them about how this was happening. We did it with some of our special ed inclusion. I think some of the care team work, we could arrange opportunities for you to go see in action so you feel what it is that we're talking about and it doesn't just feel like adult blah, 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 but you can feel what's happening. The other opportunity this year will be, again, the Teaching with Purpose Conference. That is one that is PAT's very involved in hosting and putting on. We as a district sponsor it. It ends up being practitioners really sharing their work with each other, and it's something that the entire board would be invited to go and participate in. So I just think let's be really intentional about having you go feel where this is happening in classrooms. And again, it's not across the entire district. We've got places where we've got pilots. We've got places where we've got this is where we want a practice we want to see spread, but we can take you to see some of those things, and I think it would address some of what you're feeling, where you sit in the meetings and hear about it, but you don't feel it.
Is that what you meant? Because I'm confused by what you mean. When you say you want to feel it, you want to be down in the classroom.
I want to
what
get those
would that
things.
look like?
I want to get those things down in the classroom.
What things?
Equity, down in the classroom. For instance, we don't have culturally relevant curriculum in social studies. We just said we didn't have it. it's a big deal. That's a big deal. Teaching children about their cultural
That's huge.
history. That's huge. That's in the classroom if we had those books in the classroom. Are we teaching teachers? We're teaching teachers how to be relevant. But I want to, if you've got a kid with a Syrian background, I want us helping you deal with that. That's what I'm talking about. Those types of things where it's really taking place. The same with the disparity. The disparity question is a huge question. It's a big part of this, and we need all sorts of surrounding approaches to it. It's all one thing. We need to have not just talking about how you can be better as a teacher and more culturally responsive, but we need to come up with plans that say, so what are we going to do with these kids if we're not kicking them out of school? Or what is our overall discipline structure? PBIS is nice and these things are nice, but what's our overall structure in the school? How are we going to do this work if we have teachers who are 0% trust and respect? How do you actually deal with disparity in the school when you have 0% trust and respect for your administrators, or 6% of the people in the school believe they can take a problem to their administrator and actually talk to them about it? Well, you can't deal with a problem as difficult and hard as the disparate discipline problem. It's huge, and it needs all this look at it, and I don't see us doing that. We do a lot of things, and when you talk, and I think you're right, we're out in this area and we're very good at this school, and geez, we're doing some great stuff. You know, I always like to use Jackson because they're doing the best art practically you've ever seen. I mean, it's unbelievable. And so are we doing art? Well, Jackson's doing great art, but over here they're not doing any. And so I just don't see it as really an effort to get down into the classroom with things that work directly with children. We don't have librarians in our schools. Well, geez, we're trying to get these children to read, but we don't have librarians in our schools? Huh?
In some of our schools.
It doesn't. We don't have librarians, certificated librarians in almost every one of our elementary schools. But we're trying to get these children who come in underserved, who have difficulty reading and don't have maybe books at home as much, and read basically in a language other than English. But we don't have things, and we don't have people there who are going to encourage them and work with them to get them to read. No, for me, that's more important than a lot of the things that we do, which I've talked about many times. That's what I'm talking about. I don't think we're thinking like that. I'd like to see us think like that. It's fine. It's not like we're not doing something wrong or bad or evil. We're having good efforts. I mean, everybody wants this situation to get better in terms of all of the children learning as much as they can. Everybody wants that. But I think sometimes we have a tendency to gloss over it and think we're doing okay when in actuality we're really get down and here's what we want to do. We want to have these children in this school. We want to have them to not be racially discriminatory, say. What are we doing for that? Do we have programs that work on that? Maybe PBIS does that. Does it do that? Probably does to some degree. Do we have it every place? Do we have it? And how are we building it in? Or are we just doing, I mean, there's so many things, and it's not like we're not trying. I think we're trying hard, and everybody on this board cares about this issue. I just would like to approach it from a different angle. I think it would have a chance to be more successful. Let's quit polarizing and pull together to help all children in the school system. And basically, to a certain degree, with a lot of the stuff we do, we polarize instead of everybody working together. And it's not intentional, it's unintentional. It's fine. But that's just
that was some answer.
Good.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Welcome.
I do. I do. Director Morton, did you have something
Yeah.
else?
I think a couple of things, not in direct response to Director Beal's comments. One is I think is harm being done question is probably one, from my perspective, that's pretty open. And I could line up a lot of individuals that would say a lot of harm has been done over decades of underserving communities. So as Mr. Poe suggested, my urgency is a little high. But I did want to mention one thing that I thought is interesting, and I think this is a positive thing for PPS, and that is how far out ahead we are in this equity work across across the Portland metro area, but also across the state of Oregon. Our equity policy predates 4 other districts in the Portland metro area by at least 2 years. And one Portland area district still does not have an equity policy. The TEL survey that we're digging into doesn't mention equity once in the questions. Even in the question, what professional development do you think you need? It's not listed in that. So that tells me that this is not front of mind for as many people as it needs to be. And I think that, that may be an oversight, but I think for quite a few decades, students have been the oversight. Certain students have been the oversight. And I think that's where our equity effort centers in, is how do we continue to how do we better serve those students who have been underserved. So, so I appreciate, again, the effort, and I appreciate the focus and the urgency associated with it. And whatever I can do to empower and encourage and push and pull, I'm gonna take that opportunity.
Great. Thanks. So I'll just tag on to that a bit, Matt, by saying it's not just locally and statewide that our equity policy is known. As most of you know, Superintendent Smith and I were in Washington, D.C. yesterday, meeting with Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, and later with the President on his My Brother's Keeper initiative. And we were called out in those groups for our equity policy and being a leader in that, and called out by other districts who have been using us as a model as they're working through this equity work as well. So kudos. And for us, it's just keep it going. Keep this front of mind for us. Your comments about the TEL survey, Matt, I had not noticed that, so thank you for bringing that to my attention. Appreciate that. And then the other, just for me, I just wanted to thank Cynthia for your description of what you're doing with the care work, because I had not heard that in that kind of detail before. And it's phenomenal, and I'm so happy that we've expanded that district-wide now. So thank you very much for your work. Anybody else? Okay, thank you all. Thank you.
Okay.
So we will move on to our next agenda item, our review of the Smarter Balanced Assessment Resolution. At our last meeting, the board received background information and discussed the Smarter Balanced Assessment Resolution. We appointed a committee of directors, Atkins, Belisle, and Buell, and student representative Andrew, to try and find to develop this resolution for the district, for all of us. And they have done a lot of work on this, including having several other people join them in that work for various parts, including Gwen Sullivan, the president of PAT, for one session at least. And I know I saw a couple of other comments from her as we went through this. So at this time, we'll now consider Resolution 4943, a resolution on implementation of a Smarter Balanced Assessment. Do I have a motion?
Moved. Second.
Director Belisle moves, and Director Atkins seconds the motion to adopt Resolution 4943. Ms. Houston, is there any citizen comment? There is not. Surprises me. Is there any board discussion on the resolution? Dr. Atkins.
Thanks so much. So I just wanted to do another additional to your lead-in and just a quick recap for folks who may have just joined us tonight on this discussion. As Chair Knowles mentioned, we did discussed this extensively last week and did sort of a nice collaborative editing session together, which was really helpful. And prior to that, we'd had a number of board members give input, and staff had extensive input in as well. And then after last week's session, had additional input from Director Buell. So what I attempted to do in trying to shepherd this through, given that we had already had that extensive editing session as a full board and had kind of agreed upon what the final version would be. So what I did was, and I think Director Buell brought forward today 4 additional changes he'd like to see. What he had I think 6 pieces after this went to the board book, and we talked it through.
We're down to 4. I'd like to get down to 1.
I put in 2 of those in what you see 4, and I emailed everyone to give you the update of what those 2 pieces were, and then he's now bringing forward an additional 4. But what I was trying to do in the final version that's before you is to strike a balance between respecting that he had still additional changes he wanted to make with our collective editing work that we had done. So that's just a little bit about that process. And then just for myself personally, I just wanted to kind of reiterate where I'm coming from with this resolution. Again, I really appreciate the collaborative work of board, partners, and staff in getting us to this. To me, it's a couple things. One is I feel like we have the potential with the Smarter Balanced Assessment to have something that is much better than what we have with the Oak Standardized Test. But what we're trying to express here to the state and federal government is the number of concerns about getting it right in the implementation. Some specific technical pieces and just the larger questions around resources and time. So that's all laid out in here in pretty extensive detail. And then the second piece for me, and I think others, but I just want to say this as a personal statement, is that it's really important that we have a strong value statement as a board around wanting to teach the whole child, that we're not about teaching to the test. So I think that's sort of the 2 main aims for me with this resolution. Again, I really appreciate the collaboration and input that went into this, and look forward to sharing this with the state and the federal government, and would welcome further conversation with those folks about how we can get this right for our kids and our teachers. And I'm supporting it.
Other comments?
Tell me when you want to make a comment.
Other comments? No? No comments?
I have a comment, but at the end.
Okay, so.
After we pass on, maybe, or before we pass it.
Oh, and I'd love the opportunity to read this into the record at some point during our process tonight.
Well, that's afterward. Okay, so the way, so everybody knows, we're figuring out how this goes forward. So what we'll do, or how we always do these, is we have a motion, and we have that, and we have public comment, and then we have discussion on the resolution. And then we'll vote, and at that time, if there are amendments you want to make to the resolution, you should do those at that time. And each amendment requires a second.
I can do it now.
And then we discuss that. So, and then we vote on them, and then we're done. Okay?
I can do it in that order.
Would you like to make your comments now?
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm planning to vote for this amendment, whether or not, I mean, this resolution, whether or not my amendments pass. So one of the amendments that I have is incredibly important that we pass it if we're going to end up with a really, quite a really excellent resolution. And there's kind of whether or not how it's accepted has to do with one phrase that I'd like to remove. But here's my comments. It is important for us to understand what this resolution does and does not do. It does 2 things. It tells the state that they don't have their act together on the new SBAC testing enough to ask us to take it seriously and use it to really inform our children's learning. It is frankly a mess. We are telling them to work on it some more and then tell us what they want to do with it. That's one section. That's what this, and to me, that's what it says. Secondly, it makes a clear statement that testing is no more important than other important parts of the education of our children. This tells our principals, and most importantly our vice principals, they're the people who often come out and do the evaluations, that when they are being educational leaders or evaluators, they are to make sure standards and testing are not the single focus, nor even the dominant focus concerning the education of our children. There's so many other things that are important, and what happens in education is the administrators lately, this is the last few years, they get one thing and they go with that, go with that, go with that, but they forget that you have also fourth grade social studies, you have also fourth grade civics, you also have fourth grade science, and so forth and so forth, not just fourth grade Common Core. So we need to make it clear to our people that it's, when you're going out and looking at what's taking place in your school, it's broader than that. What this resolution is not, it does not address the over-testing we are doing. Hopefully the superintendent will put together the committee she promised soon. This is not a referendum on Common Core, even though it could be referred to as a referendum on common sense. The problems with Common Core are not addressed, which is fine, because that's not the point of this, particularly the early childhood problems. I had another conversation recently with a friend who is working for an ESD, she's kind of running it, who is going to work with one of the state hubs, and she was lamenting the changes in early childhood programs and the new state kindergarten readiness testing. Person after person after person who works at this grade level laments this and criticizes what the Common Core does with it. And so we're not doing that, but it's something that should be done. Finally, it is not the end of this problem. The state continues to act in a manner which treats children as data points using a business model, and we need to make sure we stand up for the children in our district. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay, do you want to do
amendment?
So anybody else have amendments? Okay. So Director Buell, do you want to
I could do the, oops.
move an amendment?
Yes, I
So
do, but I
move
lost,
da, da, da.
I lost
Okay, you want to do this?
I got the amendment, I lost the original. The original
mine?
resolution. Can I?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you. This is, I think this amendment's critical to the success of this particular resolution. Because we.
Do the amendment first, say what the amendment is, and then your reasoning.
You want me to do the reasoning afterwards?
Yes.
Okay. In section C, eliminate the following. I move to amend the resolution number 4943 to eliminate the following language in section C, quote, and in the evaluation of teachers, quote.
Okay. Do you have anything else you want to say about it?
Yep.
Okay.
This is, the question is how good do we want
Well,
to?
yeah, we need a second first.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Second.
Okay, Director Curler seconding. No, go ahead.
The reason this is a critical amendment is because we want our teachers to understand that we're there on this topic. And we want people all over the state of Oregon to understand we're there. And if we're going to say, you know, we think it's okay, which kind of was what we kind of say here, we say it's our value system, okay to use standardized testing in some manner for evaluating teachers. We're turning every teacher in the entire district practically can look at that and say, no, that doesn't make, no, geez, I thought they were really close to having a great resolution, one that really makes a statement. This, and leaving this language in turns off teacher after teacher, not every teacher, it turns after teacher after teacher after teacher, person after person, all over the state, all over the country, because everybody who's really followed this stuff knows and understands that there is no such thing as a standardized test that accurately correlates and is able to actually measure and evaluate teachers based on student learning. There isn't anything. It hasn't exactly. They try to do it with the VAM, which is the value-added model. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Everybody who pays attention to that practically understands that. Okay. And so by leaving that in there, we're weakening this to the point, instead of going, hey, this is fabulous. This is a great resolution. By leaving that in there, we're saying, it's a pretty good resolution. Not bad. I'm going to vote for it either way, by the way. Okay. And then I have three other. If we pass that, I won't bother with the other three amendments.
Ooh, that's tempting. Other comments?
So I have a question about that, and maybe Director Buell can help answer, or others on the board can help answer. Yeah. It's my understanding that listening to the work that's happened from the committee that has helped design our teacher evaluation, they've grappled with this issue. Is that right?
Yes.
So gravel, and currently, this assessment is one of, as it's described in the recital, one of many of the tools that we use in that evaluation process.
20% or less, right?
Yeah, and it's part of our ability to meet Senate Bill 290.
Right, state
That's,
law.
that was my
Yeah.
next question, is the state requirement of it being a component. So as you were saying, frankly, I don't necessarily disagree with you. I think you look at you look at teachers who may be mediocre teachers at a affluent school, and their test scores are going to be higher. You can look at excellent teachers in the same grade at a poorer school, and their test scores may be lower. That to me doesn't give a clear idea of the parity of what those teachers are doing. So as a snapshot, that in and of itself may paint the wrong picture. But I'm interested in how do we reconcile the work that's happened on the committee and the requirement of the state in this recital.
And
That's
that's what we were attempting to do with the wording, which says, in accordance with state law and our own values, standardized testing is only one of many tools to be used in the assessment of student growth and in the evaluation of teachers.
And you should go on.
Want me to respond?
So could we
to
call
this?
the question?
Want me to respond to this?
Respond to.
Okay, Matt, I'd like to respond to what Matt said, because it's a good point. Yeah, that's a real good point, Matt. The other problem is that if you take the same teacher and do the same test twice, year to year, it doesn't correlate either. I mean, I don't remember the exact statistics, but I think the standard deviation, something like where, you might want to get down around 5%, it's like 50-some%. I once did a writing test in my own personal classroom, and I had 2 classes that we had killed practically to get them equal, and we even flip-flopped them. I taught them the same curriculum practically every day, and at the end of the year, one of them was at 80%, and one was at 30% passing. 30% passing was terrific for that school. 80% passing was unheard of. Maybe still be a record on that in there. But the point is a 50% difference. We balanced those kids the best they could, because there had been a big fight the year before, and we said, hey, you're giving me too many kids who are struggling, and back and forth. It does not work. And the problem that I suggested that when Ruth and I talked about this, and I really appreciate the work Ruth did on this, I said, take out our own values. I'd take that out. And then it says, because we're stuck with the state telling us we have to do it, we're stuck with it. But the state could tell us other things that we disagree with. They could pass a law that said the legislature gets this wild hair and passes a law that says you need to have corporate punishment for such and such things. We wouldn't agree with it. We might do it, but we sure wouldn't tell them we agree with it, and we shouldn't tell them we agree with this, because it doesn't work. And it's not accurate. And since it's not accurate, and the research shows over and over and over and over and over and over it's not accurate, I don't think we should agree with it. So I'd go taking out either of these. I think I'll stick with the evaluation of teachers.
Right now we're where we are, so let's stick with this for now.
In the evaluation of teachers,
Okay.
we'll take that out.
So calling the question?
Okay. And I don't think there are any more comments anyway, so. Okay, so to vote on the amendment of Section C to eliminate the language and in the evaluation of teachers, all those in.
Voice vote.
Yeah. Well, yeah. All those in favor.
Roll call vote. Thank you.
All those in favor of
Roll call vote.
amending?
Roll call vote.
Just a second. All those in favor of amending? Okay. All those opposed?
Nay.
Aye. You want me to have?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Adkins?
Aye.
Belial?
Aye for opposed? Nay.
To amending
Nay.
it.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry. Buell?
I think you're supposed to have the roll call
Yeah.
vote instead of the voice vote when it's called for.
Well, that's what we're doing right now.
No, the
Buell?
roll call vote. That would be called by Ms. Houston, right?
I don't think so.
You want
I
to
think
call
it's
the roll
called by
call
me.
vote?
Is it called
And
by
let's
me?
make sure that we all know what
Okay.
we're doing.
By Karen.
Okay.
Okay.
Ms. Houston, would you like to call the roll?
Thank you. I don't mean to be difficult,
It's
but I want
okay.
this on tape.
This is for those who, well, first of all, in support of
Remove.
amending Resolution 4943, Section C, to eliminate the language "and in the evaluation of teachers."
Okay. Director Atkins?
No.
Director Regan?
No.
Director Belial?
No.
Director Buell?
Yes.
Director Morton?
No.
Director Curler?
No.
And Chair Knowles?
No. Okay. So did you have another?
Yeah,
You
three
want
more
to do another
amendments
one?
then?
Mhm,
Okay.
Sure.
Section E. Add this
So-
language after this statement. Okay, I would make an amendment to, yeah, I know it has to be second. Make an
No, no, this
amendment
part in here.
to add this language in section E after the statement. The intent of SBA is to more authentically assess students by embedding both constructed response and performance tasks within the assessment. We would add the language, we have no idea of this if this intent has been met in the SBA test, nor do we have any assurance that it will be met.
Did you want a roll call vote on this as well? First, we need a second. A second? Okay, for lack of a second, we'll just move on to the next one.
Okay, section F.
Mhm.
I move to amend section F to add this language after this language. With the expectation that statewide testing will begin in spring of 2015, add the language after that, which begins, further, we request that the State Department of Education share the test in its entirety with our administration so we can assess the various questions concerning the adequacy of the test for use in our district.
Do you have a second?
I'll second that one.
Okay, Director Regan seconds. Do we have comments? Board comment? Director Buell?
They're going to ask us, if the state of Oregon is going to ask us to give a test to every one of our kids, of which we're going to pay about $25 a kid, plus we're going to spend hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars on the test, we ought to at least be able to look at the test and see if it makes sense. And we can't. And that's crazy. And they can say whatever they want. It's nice that we went and talked to Arnie Duncan. I like it. It sounds fun. I wish I would have been there. But I'm sorry, Arnie, you're screwed up on this. We should be able to look at the test. Do we not trust our testing people? Do we not trust our superintendent? Who is it we don't trust here so we can look at the test and see if it makes sense for our district? And so we should tell them we should be able to look at the test.
So,
Director Atkins?
So I guess my response to this would be just in terms of the process where we went through in crafting this resolution and editing it, that we worked really closely with our staff and teaching and learning, as well as research and evaluation weighed in as well. And so what we landed on in terms of our requests to the state, our list of concerns, very specific concerns to the state, that's where we landed. And so that's where I personally felt comfortable in what we would request of the state and what was appropriate in terms of our staff's response in handling it. I think we have outlined a number of issues and concerns and challenges, and again, this is a call for the state to respond and to demonstrate. We call out specifically that the state, it's on the state to show that this test is going to be reliable and valid and culturally responsive, and we're calling for that. So this was not a piece that, in working with staff, we did not include it. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. Other comments? Bobby?
So I was curious about this and fairly supportive of it, although Director Buell, I would suggest, since this is actually a request, that it, rather than having this in the recitals, it should actually be moved to number 2 in the resolved. So I don't know if that could be a friendly amendment. But number 2 in the resolved currently says, the board calls upon the state to provide the funding necessary to carry out any of the state's educational mandates. Specifically, the board calls upon the state to provide the funding necessary to implement the Smarter Balanced Assessment effectively, including funding and time for both professional development and technology resource implementation. If we added your sentence there, it would say further, We request the State Department of Education share the test in its entirety with our administration so it can assess the various questions concerning the adequacy of the test for use in our district. So to me, it makes more sense to have it as part of our resolves and the request to the state than to have it in the recitals. Because normally the recitals are just kind of the background information. So.
Yeah, I agree. I'd certainly accept that as a friendly change to my amendment, which is Robert's Rules of Order stuff is okay to go ahead and change that.
And does anyone know
So-
why
so-
specifically we don't allow,
Can I
the
just-
state
can I-
isn't allowing that?
Dr. Regan, could you just hang on a second? So actually, I think in Robert's Rules of Order that we need to finish with this one first, and then you would go ahead and do another
Okay.
one on this,
Okay.
or you could
Can
go
I-
ahead and bring this again.
I'll withdraw that motion. How about that?
Okay.
And then why don't you
Okay.
go ahead and,
Jane,
So do you want to go
withdraw
ahead and
your
do this
second.
one?
Okay.
oh, go ahead, you can.
Okay. Move that we take the language that, of the previous motion and place it where.
The end of number 2.
At the end of number 2, where Director Regan suggested.
Under resolutions.
Number 2 under resolutions.
And I would second that.
Okay, so any other discussion on that?
I think it'd be fun to have a roll
Okay,
call
shall we
on
go
this
ahead?
one. It'd be fun to have a
Okay.
roll call on this one.
We're doing roll calls tonight. Ms. Houston, would you call the roll?
Director Atkins?
No.
Director Regan?
Yes.
Director Belial?
No.
Director Buell?
Yes.
Director Morton?
Yes.
Director Curler?
Yes.
And Chair Knowles?
No. Okay,
It passes.
yep. I think we have to let Ms. Houston tell us that, though.
I shall 3 to 4?
Tell us that it passed?
No.
It passed 4-3.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4 to 3.
4-3.
4. Madam.
Director Regan,
1, 2.
Director Buell, Director Curler, Director Morton.
It
Voted passed.
Okay, did you want to do?
No,
you still
just,
want
I'll
this
let the other one
You
go.
okay
It's
with
okay,
that?
thank you.
All right, great. Yes, now we get to vote on the whole thing.
And could I add one more request, just in terms of process, whether it's before or after the vote, that we do have the opportunity as a board to read this into the record?
Okay, sure.
So your call, however you.
So we will have to remember, whoever has that section, that I have to
Yeah, I have,
include that part.
that's actually, I believe, Director Buell's section, so
There you
you can
go.
just add in that wording. I just wrote in the first 3 words with a ... and then you can just add that in, because I can't write neatly and fast enough.
Okay, the board will now vote on Resolution 4943 as amended. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed, say no. Are there any abstentions? Great. Resolution 4943 is approved by a vote of 7-0.
Great, so yay, thank you, everybody.
And
So-
we will now take the time to go ahead and read that into the record. I think we're going to take turns.
Yeah, I
'cause it's
appreciate
pretty
that. So
long.
I'm just going to pass along a copy that I've just taken the liberty of chunking out and marking with names. So thank you, everybody. Okay, so resolution number 4943, resolution on implementation of smarter balanced assessment. Recitals. A, at Portland Public Schools, our goal is that every student by name meets or exceeds academic standards and is fully prepared for college, career, and participation as an active community member, regardless of race, class, or zip code. The Board of Directors is committed to educating a populace of critical and creative thinkers who are capable of shaping a just and equitable society to lead good and purpose-filled lives ready to participate in a global economy. B, as a school board, we have high expectations for our students and staff. We believe that all PPS students can succeed academically, and we do not shy away from being held accountable for student success. Because of these high expectations, we want to ensure that any accountability measure for our students and schools is reliable, valid, and has been adopted with a culturally responsive lens. C, the PPS school board does not support teaching to the test. We believe in teaching the whole child and in the ability of skilled educators to creatively instill a lifelong love of learning. In accordance with state law and our own values, standardized testing is only one of many tools to be used in the assessment of student growth and in the evaluation of teachers. Testing should not dominate the culture or instructional time in our schools. As a school board, we believe the ultimate role of assessment is to improve instruction, not to demean teachers or principals or to label students or schools.
In addition, we recognize that no single assessment gives us the ability to accurately determine our impact on student learning. Classroom formative assessments designed by teachers, student work product reflecting proficiency and generalization of learning, and in-program assessments found within curriculum resources are but 3 other critical indicators of student achievement and teacher, principal, school, and district efficacy. A new assessment system aligned with Oregon's current math and English language arts standards is scheduled to begin in the 2014-15 school year. Along with over 20 other states, Oregon is a member of the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium, formed to create the new Smarter Balanced Assessment, which will replace the Oregon Assessment of Knowledge and Skills, or OAKS test. The intent of SBA, the Smarter Balanced Assessment, is to more authentically assess students by embedding both constructed response and performance tasks within the assessment. 24 Portland Public Schools helped pilot the Smarter Balanced Assessment in the spring. It is our understanding that the results from the 2014 field test will not be available until late November or early December of 2014, with the expectation that statewide testing will begin in spring of 2015. Given this timeline, we are knowingly entering a school year expecting all students to demonstrate their understanding of math and English language arts without first having seen evidence that the assessment is reliable, valid, and free from cultural, linguistic, and socioeconomic bias.
Recital H. Based on the history of No Child Left Behind and its waiver that designates focus and priority schools, the United States Department of Education is anticipated to continue its practice of using assessment results to hold states, districts, and schools accountable through the use of report cards, labels, and sanctions. Recital I. Oregon has just begun to reinvest in K-12 education after nearly 20 years of budget cuts following the passage of Measures 5 and 47 and 50, the statewide property tax limitation initiatives. Oregon school funding is still nearly $2 billion short of the state's quality education model, which outlines the funding necessary to ensure all students are successful. Adding new unfunded mandates jeopardizes school districts' fragile ability to reinvest resources to better serve students and to meet the state's 40-40-20 goals. We know that other school districts in Oregon face similar challenges. Recital J. The Oregon Education Investment Board's Equity Lens states, quote, "Speaking a language other than English is an asset and," continued later, "our education system must celebrate and enhance this ability alongside appropriate and culturally responsive support for English as a second language." Again continued, "Students receiving special education services are an integral part of our educational responsibility, and we must welcome the opportunity to be inclusive, make appropriate accommodations, and celebrate their assets." It continues, "That resource allocation demonstrates our priorities and our values, and that we demonstrate our priorities and our commitment to rural communities, communities of color, English language learners, and out-of-school youth in ways we allocate resources and make educational investments," and it continues, "and that an equitable education system requires providing teachers with the tools and support to meet the needs of each student."
Many national organizations have called for a moratorium of at least 1 year on any sanctions based on new assessments, including the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the American Association of School Administrators, the American School Counselor Association, the International Society for Technology and Education, the National Association of Elementary School Principals, the National Association of Secondary School Principals, the National Education Association, and the American Federation of Teachers, the National School Boards Association, and the National Parent-Teacher Association. Recital L. The PPS School Board identifies the following challenges and concerns around the state's implementation of the Smarter Balanced Assessment. Lack of an established reliability and validity of Smarter Balanced assessments across all racial groups, socioeconomic groups, and learner types. Insufficient accommodations in the SBA for English language learners and students with disabilities, which creates new barriers to student success and will disproportionately impact those students. The computer skills, such as keyboarding and drag and drop, necessary for third graders to successfully take the test will rely on access to technology and training as early as kindergarten, which is not consistently available in all schools or in all student homes. The resource impact of implementing the Smarter Balanced Assessment extends beyond the standards-based professional development of teachers. The state will need to identify cut scores for SBA without having received field test results, creating challenges for linking to previous achievement data and providing students with expectations in a timely manner. In addition, there are concerns about whether correlation of SBA results with previous achievement data can be accurately accomplished. As the state testing window is dramatically narrowed during the 12 weeks to complete both math and ELA SBA, Portland Public School students in grades 3 through 8 and 11 will be engaged in approximately 7 to 8.5 hours of testing. The current Oaks Science Assessment remains a multiple choice test, is not built so students may demonstrate their skill in scientific inquiry, and is not used as an active part of the existing State of Oregon report card. Technology purchases to upgrade student digital devices will minimally cost Portland Public Schools $1.2 million of our general fund budget.
Resolution, Section 1. The Portland Public School School Board directs the superintendent to ensure that teaching and learning in PPS are focused on education of the whole child and not on teaching to the test. That pedagogy is designed to meet the needs of all students while achieving educational standards. That educational standards are incorporated into teaching and learning in a balanced manner, along with other educational objectives supporting education of the whole child. That testing does not dominate the culture of or instructional time in our schools. That assessments are used to improve instruction, not to penalize teachers or principals or to label students or schools. And that assessments are implemented to maximize the intended flexibility, collaboration, learning, and creativity in the classroom. The board Section 2. The board calls upon the state to provide the funding necessary to carry out any of the state's educational mandates. Specifically, the board calls upon the state to provide the funding necessary to implement the Smarter Balanced Assessment effectively, including funding and time for both professional development and technology resource implementation. Further, we request that the State Department of Education share the test in its entirety with our administration so we can assess the various questions concerning the adequacy of the test for use in our district. The board The board requests that the state not use the Smarter Balanced Assessment for punitive labeling or sanctioning of students, teachers, schools, or districts. There must be assurances on the reliability and validity of the assessment. Use of an unreliable or invalid Smarter Balanced Assessment could undermine student enthusiasm for learning, could create devastating outcomes for schools, and could set schools and communities back years if not managed well at the state and local levels.
Number 4, the board calls upon the state to establish a transitional or pilot status for the Smarter Balanced Assessment, starting with its initial implementation in 2015, to provide sufficient time to ensure the reliability of the test, to provide additional teacher professional development, and to provide students and families the opportunity to understand and learn from the results of the new assessment without the high-stakes consequences that may have the unintended outcome of undermining student success. The board encourages, number 5, the board encourages the state and federal Department of Education to continue to provide students with opportunities to demonstrate essential skills for graduation through additional summative assessments such as work samples. Number 6, the board asks the federal Department of Education to grant the state's request to delay the use of SBA in the teacher evaluation system for the student data portion, given that there is not baseline data to use for effective goal setting.
Number 7, the board requests that the state eliminate current Oaks science testing to reduce the amount of standardized assessments, allowing for laser focus on implementation of Smarter Balanced Assessment and for alternative forms of assessment that allow students to demonstrate their skills in scientific inquiry. Number 8, the board directs the superintendent to submit these requests to the Oregon Department of Education and the United States Department of Education and share this resolution with our state and congressional representatives. Number 9, in the meantime, the board asks the superintendent, the state, and other partners to continue and expand their efforts to inform and engage parents and community during the transition to the Smarter Balanced Assessment. Number 10, the board directs the superintendent to provide regular reports to the board on the preparation and implementation of the Smarter Balanced Assessment. Number 11, finally, the board thanks the superintendent, staff, and teachers at PPS for their shared commitment to providing a quality, well-rounded education with high expectation for all students.
And thank you again to our board committee and staff and everyone else who had a piece of this. Okay.
That's really great.
Thanks, everybody. Goes back to Ruth. Okay, now we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is capital bond borrowing. Superintendent Smith, would you like to introduce this item?
I would, and I'll ask C.J. Sylvester, our Chief of School Modernization, and Ryan Dutcher, who's our Interim Chief Financial Officer, to come up and do this presentation. And this is in response to a request from the board to investigate potential capital borrowing when we were looking at the additional criteria for rebuild of high schools. C.J.
Good evening. The resolution before you this evening is a follow-on to the May 24 board meeting request as regards financing to meet the need for more high school classroom if changes are made to the district's capacity model. As you know, voters approved a bond measure in November 2012 that included the full modernization of 3 high schools. Those 3 high schools were intended to have a capacity of 1,500 students each. Since then, those capacities have been revised upwards to 1,700 students each. Further, staff has recommended additional refinements to the district's capacity model, which requires the provision of even more classrooms at each of the 3 high schools. These refinements include students taking advantage of access to more credit opportunities. It assumes an increase in the teacher workforce to reduce the student-teacher ratios. And when feasible, 90% of teachers work in no more than 2 classrooms, related subjects share classrooms, and that 90% of related teacher planning periods are linked. Should the board decide not to approve the proposed interim financing, either the additional refinements to the capacity model would not be made, nor their intent fulfilled, or the additional refinements can be made to the capacity model, but the high school capacities would be reduced to 1,400 students each.
So while we expect to be able to use the premium from the bond, there are a couple things that right now it's early in the process and we don't have a lot of confidence, mainly in the tax payments. And so over the next 12 to 36 months, we'll learn a lot more. And primarily, what creates our ceiling is really the commitment that we made that we would be able to repay the bonds for the tax payment of $1.10 per thousand. So over the next 2 years, we'll definitely be watching a couple key pieces closely. One will be the assessed valuations. That'll give us some indication on our ability to repay. And the second piece is obviously the tax collection rate. So once we have more confidence, we'll be able to with more assurance, be able to move forward with the bond premium. But at this point, early enough in the 8-year process, we just don't have it. But considering the need to move ahead with the design where we are today, we recommend a couple different options. One would be to create short-term borrowing through the use of an interfund loan, and the second would be to use an outside commercial loan.
We're happy to answer any questions you may have.
So which one are you really suggesting?
So at this point, we haven't done the work to really understand exactly which one's the best solution for us. We know we'll need the capacity for it, but we haven't gotten to that point.
Other questions?
Do we want to consider it first?
Oh, we have to do this.
Yeah.
Are we considering the resolution or?
The bond, yeah, hang on. Yes, the board will now consider resolution 4944 regarding authorizing borrowing to finance and refinance capital projects, interfund loans, and reimbursement. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Director Atkins moves and Director Regan seconds the motion to adopt 4944. Ms. Houston, is there any citizen comment? Thank you. Board discussion? Director Belisle?
Just general discussion? Yeah. Okay. Yes, I had a couple of general comments I wanted to make and a couple of questions too. Although you may have just answered the question because I didn't understand why there was a comment in there about borrowing from banks, but it sounds like you haven't decided yet, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So the one thing I did want to mention is when we had this discussion a while ago about whether we were going to go forward with this, one of the discussion points we had was whether or not we could go back into the education specifications and figure out if there's any way that we could potentially have some efficiencies so that we wouldn't have to do this interfund borrowing at this time. So I just wanted to let you know that I did, staff followed up with me and we had a meeting and Matt was in that meeting as well. Specifically, one of the areas that I had asked about was whether or not we needed to have a teen parent center in every single community comprehensive high school. And do we really have enough teen parents to warrant that? Would there be some efficiencies in maybe doing a regional approach or possibly having it in the case of Franklin? Could we have the teen parent center, the child care center at least part at Atkinson, which is right next door? There was a whole variety of questions prior to borrowing money I wanted to look at. So what staff basically came back and said is that they are probably going to be opening up the ed specs, and we will look at that more in kind of the September timeframe. So at first that was frustrating, but as we went through the data, what they showed is if you look at the number of students and students' home addresses, it's pretty clear that outside of 2 of our high school areas, we probably have enough students to warrant teen parents in general and past historically to warrant having these centers within the high school itself. What we would look at in terms of the education specifications in the fall, however, is changing teen parent center from a tier 1 must-have in each community comprehensive to a tier 1 or tier 2, which would be a must-have or could have, which would allow for a regional approach. So particularly in the 2 high school zones where we traditionally haven't seen historically a lot of teen parents, it might be smarter to do a regional approach. So it would simply provide perhaps for some more flexibility and we can kind of make the decision as we go. On either case, for Franklin or Roosevelt, we historically have had enough students who are teen parents to warrant having the teen parent center in those schools is basically where we came out. And in fact, our teen parents actually do pretty well educationally and getting through with that kind of support at their home school. So for me at least, it felt like that was resolved enough that I can support this. The other discussion that we talked about, and my main concern is I want to know that when we go out for the next bond, we can say that we did it on time and on budget. It seems fairly clear that because we're so early in the process now as we borrow this money, it says most likely repayment from we'll be able to repay it within this own bond, in which case we can still make that statement. It's just so early now that this would be the approach that we have to take. True. Is that a fair assessment of our discussion?
That's correct. Thank you.
Okay.
Very nice.
So the one question I did have, however, is when we were originally talking about borrowing this $8 million to make sure that our high schools are as large as we need them to be, I had presumed that that would include grant as well. So right now, the $8 million I understand is covering Franklin and Roosevelt. So what happens when grant comes along?
It is correct that the material before you this evening is for Franklin and Roosevelt. My understanding of the dialogue that took place on May 24th is that the intention was to bring forward only these 2 high schools at this time. We will in fact need the same dollar figure, relatively speaking, at Grant as we need at Franklin in order to have parity between the 2. And so we'll be looking at that point in time between the bond premium and the bond reserve. It's just the timing is such that we don't have to include them in this request for authorization, but in fact, additional funds will be needed for that budget.
And there's a good chance that that, again, could happen within our current bond.
Yes.
That we'll be able to find those. Okay. So that was a clarification I needed.
Could I ask a clarification of Bobby's comments?
Sure. Director Buell?
Bobby, did you ask about the size of the, because for me, there's two parts to it, and did you discuss this in your discussion? I appreciate you taking the lead on this. Right, on the teen centers. Right. There's two parts. There's part one, which is the space and so forth you need for the parents within the school, and the part two was the CTE preschool.
Right.
And did you distinguish out there, or did you bring that up? Did you?
Yes, and I think the main thing is we're looking at about 2,000 square feet for the child care portion, and the CTE classrooms are pretty flexible spaces so that they could be used if a principal or a school community chooses. It could be used for early childhood career learning, or it could be used for another CTE opportunity. And so I guess I didn't feel like we needed to go beyond that at this point in time.
Okay.
Matt, do you want to add anything?
2,000 square feet?
2,000 square feet was really for the child care portion.
Okay.
And if there were CTE classrooms that were connected to that, we had a whole discussion about, we wanted to make sure they're rigorous and college-bearing credit and the rest. But the main thing is that any classroom spaces that would be affiliated with that really would fall under the guise of CTE classroom spaces generally. And so that's a decision that can be made down the road.
Dr. Morton, did you have something?
Yeah, just to piggyback on the comments Director Regan mentioned, for roughly the size of 1.5 classrooms, we can, some of the data point that was the most interesting to me and most compelling to me was there's about a 40-point difference between students in graduation rate between students who participate in teen parent services and students who don't. And that last 4-year average of students who do participate outruns our 63% four-year cohort graduation rate by about another 20 points.
It's actually over 90%.
So over 90%.
Over 90%.
I know there were
and
some,
40%
over the last
for
4
those who
years,
don't.
there were some 80s, some 90s, and 100% of those students who graduated. Right. With a student population that has significant barriers, I think that is money well spent to find a strategy to eliminate those barriers and create opportunities for graduation. So I was certainly encouraged by that meeting.
So thanks, Director Regan and Morton, for updating us on that, but let's try and stay focused on this borrowing piece. So, because that's kind of outside of this.
Well, it was actually relevant because I would have been a no vote if I hadn't had a decent explanation for that. So it was very relevant for me.
Thank you for the detail. Any other? Director Blau? Sure.
One, I want to thank staff for coming back with this, and my colleagues. I don't think on the night that we took the vote to determine the additional criteria or just stick closer with what we had originally done, I think we all, as soon as we had taken the vote and closed the meeting, we all began trying to figure out how in the world could we make sure that we didn't build schools to less than what we thought they would need. And so I really appreciate everybody's efforts to say, let's find a solution. I appreciate the efforts that you've gone through to make sure that we have the options available, that we can both assure our contractors that we have the money to move forward while still trying to stay flexible, not knowing exactly where that money is coming. So with that spirit, I have 2 amendments that I'd like to offer to this. One is just an effort to add some clarity to it. And the first amendment I'd like to offer is under resolution number 1. There's a sentence that begins, "This interim financing," and I'm offer an amendment to say, "This interim financing," inserting the words, "is to ensure both high schools can fulfill the additional criteria as outlined in recital 1 and then the resolution continues, "may be used to pay costs relating to interim financing."
Second? Is there a second to the amendment? Dr. Atkins seconds. Any discussion?
That makes sense.
Makes sense, okay.
I was talking to myself for a moment.
Okay, so let's go ahead and vote on amendment to resolution, is this right? 4944 to section 1 of the resolution. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Okay. The motion passes 7-0.
Can I jump in with number 2?
Yes, go ahead.
So the second resolution modified, you should have just gotten something recently at your table. And this amendment goes to resolution resolve number 3, and it ends this sentence, the chief financial officer or district or the person designated by the chief financial officer of the district to act under this resolution may, on behalf of the district, and it ends the sentence there with a colon, and then it proceeds through A, B, C as written. It moves number 5 to a new number 6, inserting a new number 5 that would read, prior to completion of the financial transaction, staff shall return to the board at such time as recommended financing option is determined to inform the board regarding the proposed interim financing terms.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion?
I'll just say quickly, I think I appreciate the additional sort of check and balance in this, and thank you for catching that.
Any other discussion?
Just mention.
You? No?
Thank you, Director Morton, and really that's really what it was. We heard a couple questions even here tonight of which one are we choosing, and this was just an effort to have staff come back and inform us to make sure that we were aware of how we were proceeding. So, and thank you to staff for helping support and move these amendments.
Okay, we'll now vote on the amendment to recital number 3, and I think the change, an addition of a new 5 and a change of the old 5 to 6. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so it passes 7-0. Thank you, Director Blau.
Thank you.
Okay. Now let's go ahead and we'll now vote on resolution 4944 unless there's any other discussion. None? Okay, all in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed? Resolution 4944 is approved by a vote of 7-0. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right, thank you, staff.
Thank you, staff. Yes. Okay, next on our agenda is the board leadership election. We will vote on board leadership roles. Leadership roles are voted on twice annually. The State of Oregon requires a Board of Education to have a chair and vice chair, so that is how the resolutions read. However, our board has chosen to operate on a co-chair model. At this time, do I have any nominations for chair? Director Morton.
Thank you. And I'd hate to do this to you, Chair Knowles, but I'd like to nominate Pam Knowles to retain her position as chair of the board.
Thank you, Matt. Any other comments? Okay.
Do we need a second?
Well, I will. Hang on just a second. We'll now consider Resolution 4945, election of board chairperson with Director Knowles nominated for this position. We need a motion and a second. So that's Matt. Director Morton moves.
Second.
A second? Did I hear second?
Second.
Director Atkins seconds. Any board discussion?
Sure.
Director Buell.
I won't be voting for Director Knowles as chairperson of the board because I feel like we're still not getting a sense of what the chairperson actually should be doing. And the chairperson has 3 responsibilities beyond the responsibilities of every other board member, and those are clearly outlined. You don't, decision-making in other areas of the building are not one of the responsibilities, and I disagree entirely with the directions that we're taking in terms of where we should be meeting the open meetings law. And therefore, since I am opposed to that, and I won't be voting for Director Knowles as chairperson.
Other comments? Dr. Regan?
Okay, so at our retreat last week, we had a short discussion about this, and I indicated a couple of things that are important to me. One is that we have more shared leadership on the board, and I think that's been eroded of late, where we seem to be concentrating power in the chair and the co-chair. And I think that this is particularly the case now that we don't have board committees, which is a considerable mistake, I believe. I think traditionally we've rotated board leadership, providing more opportunities for different board members to step into leadership roles. We're all elected by the people. Pam, you served in leadership for 3 of the last 5 years, which I appreciate, but I also feel like it's time for us to turn the helm over to another board member and give more opportunity. I don't think it's appropriate for the board leadership to be dominated by one person or one personality when we have others who are perfectly capable of leading. I do think that it made sense to keep leadership pretty much intact. You know, during the last year when we were going through teacher contract negotiations, I don't think we needed to have a change at that point, but it seems like a great opportunity now for us to be looking at other leadership opportunities for other board members. The other thing that I mentioned is that we seem to be in a cycle a little bit lately where we're having some 4-3 votes. And I think any time that you see that cycle happening, it's important, ideally, to have the co-chairs representative of both groups, and it might be helpful to pull those folks, pull the board together, and board members feel that they, you know, that the leadership is perhaps a little bit more responsive, and I think the personalities in that case kind of complement each other's strengths and weaknesses, or what each bring to the table. So we have, at the retreat, there were 3 board members who expressed interest in board leadership. It was Pam, Ruth, and Tom. I would, and
Steve.
Team?
Steve?
I thought you had basically said you.
I said I'd be glad to be the chairperson.
Okay. So there were 4 board members who expressed leadership. I am not one of those at this point. I was in leadership for 2 years early on, and you know, for this next 6 months, my focus is going to be on the levy, and I'm happy to have others lead the board. But I would love to see Tom in leadership, whether it's the chair or the co-chair. You know, what I would like to see is that Pam continue as our rep on Council of Great City Schools. That's a really important leadership position, as we saw this week. But I think it's time for us to change up leadership a little bit, and this is a great opportunity for that. So I will be a no vote.
Okay. Other comments? Dr. Blau?
I'll be supporting the nomination, and I just want to say that I've really appreciated working with you, and leadership, and this won't surprise anybody here, so I don't mean to be preaching to the choir, so to speak, but leadership can oftentimes be thankless, because when you are following the three identified responsibilities as identified in policies, people oftentimes don't appreciate those decisions that are made as just a responsibility of as being the chair. And so I just wanted to say thank you for your hard work, and I know that it can be, of all the thankless jobs up here, that often it can oftentimes be even more thankless, because it's really easy for folks just in general to see what's going wrong or what didn't go right. It's actually hard to notice all the things that do go well, because they seem invisible to folks when they go right. So I just wanted to say thank you, and I'll absolutely be supporting your continuation.
Others? I'd just like to say thank you to Matt and to Greg for their support. It's been an honor to serve as long as I have. I appreciate the support that I've had from my colleagues who have elected me to each one of those years. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to serve one more year. So with that, Board will now vote on Resolution 4945. All in favor?
This is a resolution.
This is the vote. Yep,
Let's
this
do
is
it on roll call.
Okay. The board will now vote on Resolution 4945. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes when Ms. Houston calls the roll.
Director Atkins?
Yes.
Director Regan?
No.
Director Belisle?
Yes.
Director Buell?
No.
Director Morton?
Yes.
Director Curler?
No.
And Chair Knowles?
Yes.
Passes.
Okay. Okay. Do we have a nomination for vice chair?
I'd like to nominate Ruth Atkins. I think she's done well, I'll just say that.
Okay.
Comments later.
We'll now consider Resolution 4946, election of board vice chair with Director Atkins nominated for this position. Do we have a second?
Second.
Director Belisle moves and Director Morton seconds the motion to adopt Resolution 4946. Can we have some board discussion? Director Buell.
Well, Director Atkins has always been polite and nice to me and has been really forthcoming in her opinions and so forth. I don't think she has an idea of how this board is supposed to run. A comment that she made one time is, why would we want to bring anything to the board that didn't already have 4 votes? Well, the answer is because we're supposed to be doing everything in public. It's a public body that is supposed to be doing the work that it can in public. And so I want somebody as the chairperson and the vice chairperson who understands how a public body is supposed to work. Open meetings law, state of Oregon, I want people who support that law, and therefore I can't vote for Director Atkins, nice a person as she probably is.
Other comments?
Yeah, I really appreciate, Ruth, some of the leadership that you have taken, especially on things like the Common Core balance and our equity policy and the rest. For the reason that I stated earlier, that I don't think we should continue with the 4-3 split that we're seeing on this board, I'm going to be voting no. If you were running with Tom, I would be voting yes, but I'm going to be voting no.
Dr. Belisle?
You didn't really accept the nomination, but I'm assuming that you would. I also just want to reiterate what Bobby was saying about I've appreciated your leadership and how you've stepped into helping actually bridge some of the gaps that we sometimes experience as this board, I feel like. And I also just want to comment that I believe the comment that you made, that Director Buell just said, was made in an open public meeting at something like a retreat probably last year, that said something to the effect of, if we know there aren't 4 people sitting in this room in this public meeting right now, if we know there's only 3, why in the world would we bring it to the board? So thank you for stepping into to this role, or being willing to accept the nomination.
So I'd also like to, I will be a yes vote for Ruth, and I feel that way because over the last year while I have been in leadership, Ruth has stepped up repeatedly and brought issues to us, and also served on SACIT and provided us, as a wonderful liaison, provided us with all kinds of, or every time a memo about what's happening. She did the SBA, Smarter Balanced piece. There have been many times when we have looked for someone to be a leader, and Ruth has stepped up every time. So I'm very proud to go ahead and support her in this role. So, any other comments?
I'll just say thanks for all the comments and appreciate all of them, and if elected, it'd be an honor to serve, and I'll do my best to work with everyone on the board and lead us all forward.
You want a roll call too? Yes. Okay. The board will now vote on Resolution 4946. Ms. Houston, will you call the roll?
Yes. Director Atkins?
Yes.
Director Regan?
No.
Director Belisle?
Yes.
Director Buell?
No.
Director Morton?
Yes.
Director Curler?
No.
And Chair Knowles?
Yes.
4-3, it passes.
Thank you very much. And I also want to say, before we move off of that, I want to thank Director Belisle for his years of service. He's done a fabulous job, and I really enjoyed serving with you, and I thank you for your service. You're right, it is not, it is pretty a thankless job, but I really do appreciate the steadiness that you brought and the organization that you brought to this, and appreciate that, Greg. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
You can make a comment too.
Thank you, Director Knowles, and thank you those that just reiterated appreciation. It's while I don't want to say we joke, we know it's a thankless job. I just want to say that it's really rewarding work. And for the places where I wasn't able to move work that was important to folks, it's disappointing. And for the places that we actually made a lot of progress, I appreciate your willingness to support and work together to make that happen. But it was a true honor to be in leadership, and I look forward to trying to find a way that we can all work together to advance the work that we as a board know need to be done.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll move on to our business agenda. The board will now consider the remaining items on its business agenda, having already voted on Resolution 4943 and 4946. Please note that the correct version of Resolution 4941 is before you and was sent previously via email and posted on the website, just at our place tonight. Copies are also available on the shelf in the back for the public. Ms. Houston, are there any other changes to the business agenda?
There's not.
There are not. Do we have a motion and a second to adopt the business agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Director Regan moves and Director Morton seconds the adoption of the business agenda. Ms. Houston, any public comment?
No.
No. Is there any board discussion? Director Buell.
I have a question on the new contracts, on all through, one on each of them, and I apologize to both the board and the superintendent for not doing this. It just, I meant to do it, and it just slipped by me today.
Popped out.
It just slipped by. Some of those old, you know, like, did I miss lunch, I think. Okay, so the first one is the inline commercial construction, and we're painting Alameda at $157,310, and it's basic, it's built around the lead paint. Is it built around the lead paint complaints? That's why it's not, this is something, how did we come about Alameda? If there's not lead paint at Alameda, why aren't we painting other lead paint things instead of painting Alameda? I don't know. That's what I should have asked. I apologize.
We're painting 4 buildings over the summer. Alameda's one. The reason you see Alameda is it's the most expensive one. It also is one of the most worst buildings in the school district in terms of the condition of the paint. Lead, but peeling paint just in general. We have a number of other buildings, Sitten, Woodlawn, and Peninsula. Peninsula are 3 other schools we'll be painting. You don't see those because the cost to paint those is less.
What's the deal on the lead? Do we have other schools with identified lead paint that we haven't painted over or taken the lead paint off? And
we inspect our buildings regularly. We're required to look at and real close attention at those spaces that are adjacent to or occupied by our younger students, because younger students are the ones that are most susceptible to lead paint. So those spaces we inspect regularly and touch them up and paint over it. But you know, in a district where our buildings were built during that era, lead paint is the predominant paint that was used and exists in many of our buildings. Regardless if the exterior may not, you know, the exterior layer may not be lead paint, but definitely as you start digging in, you're gonna find lead paint.
So like, let's take just, let's say Braxton School has some lead paint. Would they not, and they've got lead paint peeling on their, in their main hallway in some factor. Why would we paint Justin School if their regular stuff, if Braxton School had lead paint? Wouldn't we take care of the lead paint first if we had other lead paint? I mean,
I mean, I would prioritize based on the risk of safety, and that's how we prioritize.
And we have done that?
Yes.
Okay, that's my, thank you very much. I appreciate that, Tony.
Could I ask a follow-up question on Alameda?
Sure.
I was a little surprised to see this because we did so much work last summer at Alameda, so I had kind of presumed that we'd take care of some of this other work. Is it a completely separate project?
It is a completely separate project, yes.
I should have asked that. I would have just called it, but I just forgot. Okay,
You want to do the next
second
one?
question.
Yep, go ahead.
Funds for Learning district-wide E-rate consulting services, $247,500. What do we got going here?
So E-rate is a program that allows a reimbursement on technology infrastructure. We average about $1 million roughly over the last few years reimbursement that we get back. It's reimbursement on investments in IT infrastructure, wireless devices, and this company we use because they help interpret the federal regulation. It's very, it's monitored, and you really want to be in compliance with this program, especially when they're giving you money. So, and this particular year, the federal regulations are changing, and we want to be careful in what we seek reimbursement for. So the net, it nets us somewhere between $800,000 and $1 million a year.
So we pay money to get more money
Yes,
back. Okay,
exactly.
then the last question, which I'll bet it's not yours, Tony. Catapult Learning, LLC. The question that I had on that one is, we're doing tutoring services and math. I had a friend who did tutoring services, and the company that was getting the tutoring service, and this was 3 or 4 years ago, was getting $180 an hour for tutoring. So I'm curious. Yes, no kidding. I'm wondering what the rates are here for these tutoring services to Catapult Learning, and how come we go to is this a consulting firm? I assume, I mean, not a consulting, but it's a private firm. Why would we go there instead of organizing this ourselves and maybe paying some people who could use that money in tutoring or something, and how much are we paying per hour to Catapult, those kind of things? Sorry about not getting to this earlier. I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't have that information on the tip of your tongue.
Yeah, and I do not have that information.
Yeah, I guess.
As this comes out of Title I dollars associated with private school set-aside. So the way that set-aside works in Title I dollars is that you identify a certain amount of money by federal law that goes toward the private schools. We don't have an option to dictate to them how those dollars will be invested. So I see the contract before us as well. It does not come out of the Office of Teaching and Learning.
It's a pass-through?
It comes out of Title I dollars. Yeah,
Is
it's
this
pass-through
Title
dollars
I pass-through to a private?
to private schools.
Okay, great.
Correct.
You don't happen to know how much they're paying per hour, are they?
I don't, I'm sorry.
Just checking. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're probably right, it's probably outrageous.
Okay. Others, Director Regan?
I just wanted to call out the 4 revenue contracts, even though they're small amounts, they're really exciting. So 3 of them are private donations from soccer clubs, and the rest to our field projects this summer. At our high schools, we're doing turf fields. So really grateful for these kinds of donations and partnerships. And the other one is really exciting, which is at Benson. Kaiser Permanente Foundation has come forward with $40,000 to help us with a one-time award for funds to support the school-based health clinic at Benson and for our planning around that.
I was going to say, that's a planning grant.
That's a planning grant. Yeah. So we have health clinics at most of our high schools, but not all of them yet. And so this is a really exciting opportunity, I think, for us to potentially move that forward at Benson. Yeah. So grateful to Kaiser Permanente.
Great. Thank you for calling those out. Okay, any other comments, discussion? All right, the board will now vote on the business agenda. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, say no. Are there any abstentions? The business agenda is approved by a vote of 7-0. The next meeting of the board will be held on Tuesday, August 5th, 2014. This meeting is adjourned.